The Sith Order produced thousands of dark side users across its history. Most of them never left a name behind. 5 did, and they reached a new level of raw force power that nothing else in galactic history ever matched. The ranking comes down to raw force ability first, then the scale of impact each of them produced. The countdown runs from 5 to 1. Number 5 is the only Sith on this list whose power didn't come from training or bloodline. It came from a Jedi superweapon that went off under his feet and tore a wound in the Force that never closed. Darth Nihilus survived that blast, and from the moment he stood up, he stopped drawing on the Force the way other beings did. He fed on it. The scale of what he could feed on is why he's on the list. The fragile body doing the feeding is why he's not higher.
We don't know much about Nihilus before Malachor V, but we do know he was a human male who served in the Mandalorian Wars, fighting alongside Revan's forces against the Neo-Crusaders. For years, he fought in the war, losing everything in the fighting: his family, his friends, even his will to live. But at Malachor V, as he stood on the planet's surface during the final battle, everything went terribly wrong. The moment had finally come to end the war, and when General Mitra Surik gave the order to activate Revan's secret weapon, he felt something terrible wake up in the Force. A wave of fear washed over him as the mass shadow generator created a huge gravity trap that crushed Malachor V's orbiting fleets in an instant. The ground shook hard beneath him as the planet itself began to crack, and his fellow soldiers died instantly, crushed by the debris or eaten by the dark energies set free. But something different happened to him, something that would change the entire galaxy. Nihilus survived when others died, becoming a wound in the Force, a void of emptiness. Acting without thinking, he drained the life force of a dying soldier nearby to keep himself from falling apart. This act briefly stopped his pain but left him forever wanting more. From that moment, Nihilus's ties to normal feelings were cut. He only felt an endless hunger, not sadness or guilt for the lives he took. He found out that he could survive only by eating the Force energy of other living beings, and with each life he ate, his hunger grew back even stronger. Nihilus's body, already kept alive only by the dark side, began to waste away. Over time, he would lose his physical form completely. Each feeding gave him a short break, but left him even weaker if he went without food, creating a terrible cycle of endless starvation. After the battle, he stayed trapped in the wreckage on Malachor V's destroyed surface, basically stuck among the ruins. Soon, he needed more life force each day just to keep his dying body together, and even while actively draining whatever life was nearby, the emptiness inside kept growing larger. Over time, the dark side's poison ate away at his body until nothing of his original form was left. This faceless ghost would later be named Darth Nihilus by Darth Traya. But at that time, he was simply a being of hunger and dark force energy. The Sith Triumvirate. After the Jedi Civil War, the fallen Jedi Kreia, now Darth Traya, found this wound in the Force on Malachor V and saw potential in it. She took Nihilus to the Trayus Academy and became his Sith Master, teaching him to focus and use his hunger as a weapon on purpose rather than let it eat him up without control. Under Traya's training, Nihilus's feeding ability became far more controlled and powerful. He learned to feel the life force of faraway Force-sensitive beings and even drain whole populations across space through the Force. This made him a perfect Jedi hunter in the years to come. Under Traya's teaching, Nihilus accepted his role as what she would call the Lord of Hunger. He got better at his ability to feed on the Force, learning to control the process so he could adjust his feeding as needed. Even better, he learned to feel distant Force presences and drain life across the huge distances of space. This ability would make him the perfect hunter of Jedi. Kreia gave him the Sith name Darth Nihilus, a name meaning nothingness to match the emptiness he represented. From then on, he was known as Lord of Hunger, no longer a man, but a living void driven only by the need to feed. In fact, Kreia later said that Nihilus's presence alone could kill. His mere presence kills those around him. Spending too much time near the Lord of Hunger turned his Sith followers into dried-up slaves barely holding on to life, showing how even standing in Nihilus's shadow was dangerous. As Nihilus lost what made him human, he stopped speaking in any normal human language. Instead, when he made sounds, an inhuman hollow voice came out, one that literally carried his hunger with it. Hearing this terrible voice was painful. In fact, Nihilus's very speech could cause pain or death to anyone who heard it. Eventually, Nihilus's real body rotted away completely, and to avoid losing his existence to the void, he tied his life force to his mask, armor, and robes through Sith magic. These items became containers for his spirit. Without them, his essence would disappear into nothing. Therefore, the armor and mask were not just clothes. They were Nihilus. Nihilus soon joined with Traya and another of her students, Darth Sion, the so-called Lord of Pain who could not die, to form a secret Sith triumvirate. Their shared goal was to wipe out the Jedi Order, though each Dark Lord was broken in a different way. Traya, having been thrown out and feeling betrayed by the Force, wanted the complete end of the Force itself. Sion's undead existence was kept going by pain and hatred, and Nihilus was a bottomless pit of hunger that would eat all life if nobody stopped him. By combining their strengths, they planned to finish what Darth Revan and Malak had started, to wipe out the last Jedi in the galaxy. In practice, the Triumvirate's methods worked well together. Sion's Sith assassins hunted and murdered lone Jedi in hiding, while Nihilus worked as a living doomsday weapon. If the Jedi tried to gather or rebuild, he would feel that concentration of life in the Force and eat the entire gathering at once. This meant any world hosting a Jedi meeting became Nihilus's target for destruction. The surviving Jedi learned that even being in the same place was dangerous, forcing them to stay scattered and hidden. Alone, they were far easier targets for Sion's agents. But the alliance didn't last. In 3955 BBY, Nihilus and Sion got tired of Traya's leadership. They attacked their master in the Traya's core. Nihilus slammed her against the platform with the Force, and Sion beat her until she couldn't fight back anymore. Together, the two Sith drained Traya's connection to the Force, cutting off her abilities. Darth Traya was defeated and thrown out, left for dead by her backstabbing students. Thrown out and weakened, Traya came to sadly realize what Nihilus truly was, a monster born of Malachor that, without guidance, could eat everything without caring. No longer controlled by her influence, Nihilus was not a precise weapon, but a wild force of nature beyond control. In exile, Traya began to plan a way to destroy the creature she had helped create. She expected that the Jedi exile, Mitris Surik, who had accidentally played a part in Nihilus's creation at Malachor 5, would one day return from the Outer Rim. Traya quietly set up Surik as the answer to Nihilus, believing this wound in the Force could face the Lord of Hunger when the time came. Without Traya's influence, Nihilus existed only to feed. He had no big plan or final goal beyond the next meal. With each feeding, his power grew. But so too did his hunger, doubling after each feeding. He was already dead in every way that mattered. The only question was how many he would kill before he finally fell apart. The consumption of Katar. In 3952 BBY, Jedi Master Atris came up with a plan, one that sadly became the Jedi Order's biggest disaster. She secretly called the surviving Jedi Masters to a meeting on the Miraluka colony world of Katar, planning to use their gathering as bait to draw out the hidden Sith threat. Atris herself stayed behind on Telos 4, hiding her absence but quietly spreading word of this Jedi meeting in hopes the Sith would take the bait. She promised the others that if the Sith showed themselves, they could be faced and destroyed. Unfortunately, Atris badly underestimated the power hiding in the shadows. She believed the secret meeting on the Miraluka colony would lure the Sith into a trap she could spring. She promised the remaining Jedi Masters that when the Sith came, they would be ready to strike back. But what she didn't understand was how powerful Nihilus had become. Her trap would work, though not in the way she planned. Drawn by this bright light in the Force, Nihilus felt the Katar gathering like a burning beacon calling out to his hunger. He immediately set course for Katar aboard his scary flagship, the Ravager. The Ravager was a wrecked Republic capital ship from Malachor 5, a vessel that should have been destroyed. Its hull was cracked and open to space in places. Basically a dead ship kept alive only by Nihilus's power. With this ghost ship and his fleet of Sith leftovers, Nihilus arrived at Katar to feed. The Dark Lord stood on his bridge and let loose his power upon the planet. He sent out a huge wave of Force energy downwards, an invisible storm that touched every living thing below. When Nihilus was close enough, he spoke a terrible spell, his very voice filled with hunger, and that sound echoed across Katar, destroying life as it spread. In an instant, Jedi Master Vandar Tokari and the entire group of Jedi at the meeting fell as their life energy was ripped away. Decades of training made no difference. In just seconds, every living thing on the planet was completely eaten. The Mira Luca colonists, being naturally Force-sensitive, saw their coming doom through the Force. The entire civilization died in moments, their foresight giving them a brief, terrible awareness of the nothing that swallowed them. Cities full of life seconds earlier had fallen quiet, turned into mass graveyards under a now empty sky. The surface of Qatar was cleaned of all life, turned into lifeless rock and dust. Back on Telos, Atris, who had purposely stayed away from the meeting, felt the shock of those countless deaths through the Force. Only afterward did she fully understand how huge her mistake was. Yes, her trap had drawn out the hidden Sith, but at a terrible price. The gathered Jedi were destroyed, and an entire Mira Luca colony was destroyed. Atris had tried to save the Jedi Order by finding its enemies. Instead, her actions almost finished the Jedi Order. Among the destruction, one person survived, a Mira Luca woman named Visas Mar. Nihilus found the badly hurt Visas on the surface, and instead of killing her, he knocked her out and brought her aboard his ship. When Visas woke up days later, fully healed on the Ravager, Nihilus silently invaded her mind and showed her a vision of the galaxy through his eyes. In this vision, Visas saw a galaxy where all beings were stripped of the Force, disconnected from one another, and lost in chaos. Nihilus saw himself bringing order to this chaos by eating all life. This terrible sight destroyed her Force vision, literally burning her blind eyes and cutting off her view of anything except Nihilus. In that moment, Visas gave in completely to the being who had killed everyone on her world. Broken by the loss and the dark vision, she became Nihilus's obedient servant, his shadow hand, completely under his control and without hope. Qatar's destruction basically erased the Mira Luca presence there, an entire Force-sensitive culture. After this terrible act, Visas Mar became Darth Nihilus's shadow hand, tied to him by a powerful Force bond. Through this bond, created in the vision that broke her, she could feel her master's hunger and pain, and she served him completely, even helping and looking for new feeding grounds when he asked. It was only much later, after the Jedi exile Mitra Surik spared Visas' life and showed her kindness, that Visas woke up to regret. Under Surik's guidance, she turned against Nihilus and began to hate what she had done in his name. But that lay in the future. The Lord of Hunger Ascendant. Having eaten Qatar, Nihilus had gone beyond any normal Sith goal. Politics or revenge didn't interest him. He existed only to satisfy his endless hunger. Even other Siths stayed away from him, knowing that Nihilus would just as easily eat allies as enemies. In the following years, the Lord of Hunger wandered the Outer Rim aboard the Ravager. Followed by a fleet of wrecked warships, he kept going through the dark side. He searched for worlds rich in the Force to eat, and whispers spread of a terrifying Sith Lord who could eat entire planets. The truth of Nihilus's rampage was even more horrible than the rumors. With each feeding, his power and hunger only grew, leaving whole systems lifeless behind him. During this time, Nihilus wandered the Outer Rim with his fleet, searching for worlds strong in Force energy to feed his hunger. Stories of his destruction spread through the galaxy like wildfire, and whispers of a Sith Lord who could eat entire worlds became the stuff of nightmares. But the reality was far worse than any story could describe. Aboard the Ravager, Nihilus's presence had destroyed his own crew. The warship, still cracked and half-ruined from Malachor V, worked only through Nihilus's dark will and a skeleton crew of followers enslaved by his power. Whole sections of the ship were open to space, useless except to corpses and mindless shells. Those sent to serve Nihilus quickly lost their minds and strength, turned into slaves that walked through the ship doing simple tasks, barely alive. The hallways of the Ravager were filled with the proof of Nihilus's hungry nature, each crew member showing the slow death that waited for anyone who stayed near the Dark Lord too long. During this time, Visas Mar acted as Nihilus's agent and messenger. As the one person connected to his mind, she managed tasks aboard the Ravager and helped carry out his will, even looking for important Force echoes or targets for him to feed upon. Tied to Nihilus by the Force, Visas could feel the beating of his hunger within her own mind. She felt that every moment for him was torture, his existence a pain of endless need that only eating life could briefly calm. By now, nothing of the person he once was seemed to remain. Nihilus worked by pure instinct, driven by need rather than thinking. When she looked at her master through the Force, she saw only an all-eating void. Around 3951 BBY, Nihilus's influence spread into the Onderon Civil War. His Sith forces secretly backed General Vaklu's rebels in their attempt to overthrow Queen Talia. Nihilus's agent, Colonel Tobin, Vaklu's second-in-command, acted as the go-between for this partnership. Their goal was to cut Onderon's ties to the Republic, which included getting rid of Queen Talia's Jedi advisor, Master Kavar, one of the last Jedi Masters. Nihilus's followers even set up a camp in the Forbidden Tomb of Freeden Nad on Dixun. There, the Sith performed dark rituals, trying to strengthen Vaklu's rebellion by drawing on the tomb's dark side power and therefore tip Onderon's fate in Nihilus's favor. In early 3951 BBY, Nihilus felt something wrong in the Force, an echo strangely familiar to his own, yet not the same. Unable to understand it, he sent Visas Mar to investigate and get rid of its source. That source was Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile, who had just returned from exile and unknowingly gave off a wound in the Force like Nihilus. Visas found Surik's ship and attacked, trying to capture or kill her as ordered. But Surik defeated Visas in the following fight. Yet instead of killing the Miraluka, Mitra Surik chose mercy, sparing Visas' life and even treating her injuries. This unexpected kindness shook Visas deeply. Nihilus's slave found herself shown kindness for the first time since Qatar, creating the hope that she could escape the darkness she was tied to. Visas' betrayal had begun, and that spark of freedom would prove important in the trials to come. After Vaklu's defeat, Colonel Tobin, hurt and desperate, ran to Darth Nihilus. Taking Krea's trick, Tobin told Nihilus that a secret academy of Jedi was gathered on Telos 4, unknowingly delivering the bait Krea had planned. This false rumor of many Jedi on Telos instantly caught Nihilus's attention. The bait was set, and Nihilus moved to feed. By this stage, Darth Sion himself stayed away from Nihilus. He knew too well that Nihilus's careless hunger could just as easily eat a Sith ally as any Jedi. In truth, the Sith triumvirate had broken apart in all but name. Sion continued his campaign of terror with elite assassins, picking off Jedi survivors one by one, while Nihilus searched the stars for entire worlds to eat. The two Sith Lords rarely talked now, each following their own path. What remained of the triumvirate was simply two dark beings with different methods of reaching the same dark goal. Without Treya's influence, Nihilus existed only to feed. He had no big plan or final goal beyond the next meal. With each feeding, his power grew, but so too did his hunger, becoming harder to satisfy after every feeding. By 3951 BBY, only a handful of Jedi were even left alive. Masters like Zez-Kael, Vrook Lamar, Kavar, and Atris, who had not gone to Qatar, were among the few survivors, and they stayed in hiding. Basically, the galaxy had no real defense against the Lord of Hunger. No Jedi could gather to challenge him without becoming his next meal. The Trap at Telos. Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile, had returned to known space by 3951 BBY. Without knowing it, she was special in a strange way. Like Nihilus, Mitra was a wound in the Force, formed at Malachor 5. Yet her condition was the complete opposite of Nihilus's. Where Nihilus's wound made him always drain life, Mitra's wound showed up as nothing, an empty spot in the Force. She survived Malachor 5 by cutting her connection to the Force, making herself empty to its touch. This meant that where Nihilus always ate life to survive, Mitra Surik was an empty space that could not be eaten or filled. In simple terms, the exile's very nature made her the perfect weapon against the Lord of Hunger. This Telos trap was the final piece of Krea's long game. By using Colonel Tobin's false report, Krea tricked Nihilus with the promise of a hidden Jedi academy on Telos 4. However, the truth was different. Telos had no Jedi gathering at all. Only Atris lived there, and she had fallen from the Jedi path and collected Sith artifacts. Still, Nihilus believed the lie completely. Thinking a great feast of Jedi awaited him, he flew towards Telos with the Ravager, expecting a rich meal of Force energy that didn't really exist. Mitra Surik knew Nihilus would attack, so she set up her own trap at Telos. She got both the Republic Navy and the Mandalorians to work together for defense. Admiral Cartho Nassi brought the Republic fleet, and Mandalore the Preserver, leader of the Mandalorians, brought his warriors to help. They all knew that normal fighting alone would not stop Nihilus. After all, how do you fight someone who can eat whole planets? As a result, while their fleets fought Nihilus's escort ships in space, Surik and her allies got ready for the real plan. They would sneak onto Nihilus's own ship. The plan was to get on the Ravager and blow it up from the inside, and fight Nihilus face to face, while the space battle kept his forces busy outside. When Nihilus's Ravager reached Telos, a huge space battle started above the planet. Republic warships shot at Nihilus's Sith vessels, and Mandalorian fighters attacked the Ravager's guns directly. Space was filled with laser fire and explosions, but this battle was really just to distract Nihilus. Using this cover, Meetra Surik led a small team that sneaked onto the Ravager. This strike team had 3 people: Surik herself, Mandalore, who was really Canderous Ordo, and Visas Mar, who had now turned against her old master to help Surik. These 3 people carried the galaxy's only hope of beating Nihilus. They had 2 jobs on the Ravager: plant bombs to blow up the ship and fight Nihilus on the bridge. Walking through the broken hallways, Surik's team fought groups of Nihilus's slave soldiers. The ship itself seemed to cry out from Nihilus's dark power, its hallways dark and frightening. They fought brain-dead Sith soldiers at every corner. These walking corpses were Nihilus's newest victims, still doing his commands but with no minds left of their own. The strike team kept moving toward where the Dark Lord waited. Visas knew the Ravager's hallways well, so she led her friends through the ship's twisted paths. As they moved forward, she could feel Nihilus learning about the intruders on his ship. The dark side pushed down on them like a heavy weight. The whole ship was full of Nihilus's evil power. Then, Visas felt something she didn't expect. Through the force bond connecting her to Nihilus, she felt him getting confused. Nihilus's hunger had found the boarding team, but he could not see Meetra Surik properly. To Nihilus's force powers, the exile was something wrong, an empty space in the force, something he couldn't see or eat. This blind spot in what Nihilus could see would lead to his defeat. The death of emptiness. On the bridge, they found Darth Nihilus waiting for them. Just being near him was terrible. The air got cold and the shadows got darker, like all the darkness came together around him. Even the tough Mandalore felt scared when he saw him. This was not a man anymore, but a living, empty space that had taken a shape. Nihilus welcomed them with a terrible blast of his voice, a sound that hurt their minds with hunger and death. Yet then, something strange happened. Nihilus himself stopped moving. Through the Force, Visas could feel that he was confused. He could not understand what Meetra Surik was. His strongest power, the ability to drain life from his enemies, found nothing to grab when he tried it on the exile. For the first time since Malachor V, Darth Nihilus didn't know what to do. The person he wanted to eat was impossible to touch, an empty space he couldn't reach. And so, the Lord of Hunger stopped to think. The shock of his failure made the Sith Lord freeze, unable to believe that for once, his hunger couldn't touch what he wanted to eat. Since his main power didn't work, Nihilus had to try other attacks. He threw force energy at her, sent waves of darkness, tried everything to beat the exile. However, Meetra Surik stayed strong, fighting Nihilus with her lightsaber instead. Unlike all of Nihilus's other victims, Surik couldn't be beaten by his one special power. This fight had to be won with regular fighting. And when they fought with lightsabers, Nihilus's problems became clear. He wasn't used to fighting someone he couldn't drain strength from, so the exile's careful lightsaber attacks began to push him back. Every hit she landed made Nihilus weaker because he couldn't steal life energy to make himself stronger again. The Dark Lord had used his draining power for so long that, without it, he was losing to the skilled and brave Jedi exile. At one key moment, Nihilus threw Meetra Surik backwards with the Force, almost winning the fight. When Visas saw her friend in danger, she bravely jumped between them. She offered her own life to Nihilus in exchange for sparing Meetra Surik. At the same time, Mandalore ran forward, shooting his blaster and hitting the confused Sith Lord. While Nihilus was still stunned from the broken bond and hurt from Mandalore's attack, he couldn't defend himself. The exile got back up quickly, and together, Meetra Surik, Visas, and Mandalore attacked all at once, finally bringing Darth Nihilus down while he was weak. Darth Nihilus could barely stand now, yet he tried one more time to use his power. Unfortunately, there was nothing left for him to use. All his energy was gone, and there was no life around for him to eat. Right then, Meetra Surik moved forward and struck the final blow. Her lightsaber hit perfectly, cutting down the Lord of Hunger. Nihilus fell to the floor, unable to keep his body together anymore. After the battle ended, Visas walked over to where Nihilus had fallen. Maybe feeling sorry for him, or maybe just curious, she carefully took off his famous mask, wanting to see the face of the man he used to be. There was nothing there. Whatever was left of him disappeared completely. His robes dropped to the floor as his body turned to nothing. Darth Nihilus said no final words. There was nothing left to say, and nothing left of him to say it. So Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, was no more. The endless hunger that had driven him was put out at last, and the void he represented ate the last of his form as he died. Darth Nihilus had eaten entire worlds, yet died hollow and unfulfilled. Proof that unlimited power without purpose leads only to self-destruction.
Number 4 is the only Force user in galactic history trained by both the Jedi and the Sith. Darth Revan led a war as each, and at the height of his power, he did something nobody else on this list ever managed. He walked into the throne room of the Sith Lord at the top of this ranking, broke that Lord's hold on his own mind, and walked back out alive. That's the version of Revan this story is about.
The Rising Star, a legend story. The boy showed incredible Force powers from an early age, so he was taken to the Jedi Temple and quickly proved himself as something special. Unlike other students who learned from 1 or 2 teachers, Revan studied under many different masters. His curiosity regularly led to dangerous questions, but masters like Dorak saw his rare potential and watched his quick rise through the ranks. But it was his friendship with a fellow student named Alec that would shape both their futures in ways neither could imagine. Revan and Alec were best friends who balanced each other perfectly. Where Alec was hot-headed and direct, always ready to act, Revan was thoughtful and inspiring, able to lead others with his words alone. Even as students, the other young Jedi looked to Revan as their leader, drawn to his natural charm and deep understanding of the Force. His teachers saw in him the potential to become one of the greatest Jedi who ever lived. They had no idea how right they were. Master Vandar believed Revan would become a hero of the Order, while Master Vrook warned that his thirst for knowledge could lead him down dangerous paths. But even Vrook couldn't deny Revan's amazing abilities or the respect he earned from his fellow students. As he grew stronger in the Force, Revan became fascinated by Force bonds and rare Force powers that most Jedi thought were too dangerous to study. So he started studying ancient methods while diving into forbidden books with an intensity that both impressed and worried his masters. But in 3976 BBY, everything changed when the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders began their brutal invasion. The Mandalorians swept through Republic space with terrifying efficiency, conquering world after world as their war machine crushed everything in its path. Civilians died by the millions as entire sectors burned and whole species faced extinction. And the Jedi Council did nothing to stop the slaughter. The Council claimed they sensed a bigger threat behind the Mandalorians, some hidden enemy pulling the strings from the shadows. They urged patience, meditation, and trust in the Force, advice that felt empty to young Jedi watching innocent people die. Revan couldn't stand it anymore and decided to take action. He began speaking out against the Council's inaction, arguing that the Jedi had a sacred duty to protect the innocent from harm. His natural charm and passionate beliefs drew followers. First Alec, then dozens of other young knights who shared his frustration. These rebel Jedi became known as the Revanchists, named after their charismatic leader. But the Council remained inactive and grew increasingly unhappy about Revan's movement. The Mask of Justice. Despite the Council's warnings, Revan continued investigating Mandalorian activities, determined to uncover the truth behind their brutal war. This led him to Cathar, home world of the feline humanoid species. What he found there would plant the first seeds of darkness. Hidden in the ruins, Revan discovered a Mandalorian mask that called to him through the Force. The moment he touched it, everything changed. The Force showed him a terrible vision, the complete genocide of the Cathar people years earlier. He watched helplessly as Mandalorian forces herded thousands of innocent Cathar families to the ocean's edge for execution. He saw families torn apart, children crying for parents who would never answer, and brave warriors fighting desperately to protect the innocent. When one brave Mandalorian warrior tried to stop the slaughter, she was executed by Cassus Fett. The leadership showed no mercy for dissent. Holding the fallen warrior's mask, Revan made a vow that would define him. He would take up her cause and wear the mask until the Mandalorians were defeated completely. In that moment, the young Jedi became Revan. Even the Council couldn't ignore the overwhelming evidence of genocide. Grudgingly, they allowed Revan and his followers to join the war as a Republic Mercy Corps. What followed was a masterclass in military strategy and the beginning of Revan's transformation. Revan proved to be a tactical genius, developing strategies that turned Mandalorian strengths against them. Victory after victory followed, but each triumph came at a cost. War changes everyone, even heroes. As the conflict dragged on, Revan began adopting his enemy's ruthless methods to achieve victory at any cost. Supreme Chancellor Tol Kressa appointed him Supreme Commander, giving him unprecedented power. The greatest tragedy was yet to come, beyond the edge of known space, where an ancient evil waited. The price of victory. By 3960 BBY, Revan faced a terrible choice that would change everything he thought he knew about war, victory, and the price of peace. The war was stuck despite years of fighting. Mandalore the Ultimate commanded forces that seemed impossible to defeat through normal means, their warrior culture making them nearly unbreakable. The Republic was bleeding resources and lives, while the Mandalorians grew stronger with each passing day. So Revan built something never seen before. The Mass Shadow Generator, a super weapon that generated a gravity well so intense it pulverized both fleets and tore Malachor V's surface apart within minutes. The device was designed by Bao Dur, a Zabrak engineer who would later regret his creation. Revan's plan was simple but devastating. Lure the Mandalorians to Malachor V, activate the weapon, and end the war in one catastrophic blow. He placed his most trusted general, Mitra Surik, in command of half the Republic fleet with a deadly mission: serve as bait to draw the Mandalorians into their final trap. Many of the Jedi and soldiers assigned to this mission were those who had questioned Revan's increasingly brutal methods, and some believe this wasn't a coincidence. Revan may have seen this as the perfect opportunity to eliminate dissent while achieving victory. The battle was everything Revan had planned, as massive fleets clashed in orbit around Malachor V. Mandalore himself challenged Revan to single combat aboard his flagship in a duel that would decide the fate of the galaxy. These two legendary warriors fought with everything they had, Revan's lightsaber meeting Mandalore's sword in an epic battle. Despite Mandalore's incredible skill, Revan emerged victorious, but Mandalore's final words revealed a shocking truth. The Mandalorians weren't acting alone. There was a greater threat, an ancient enemy controlling events from the shadows. Then, the Mass Shadow Generator activated, creating a gravity well so powerful that hundreds of ships from both sides were crushed into Malachor V's surface as thousands died in seconds. The planet itself cracked to its core, becoming a wound in the Force that would never heal, while Mitra Surik was cut off from the Force entirely. The war was over, and the Mandalorians surrendered completely. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Revan had won, but at the price of his own soul. And soon, he would discover that this victory was exactly what his true enemy had wanted all along. Into the darkness. Haunted by Mandalore's dying words that a hidden Sith Lord had manipulated the entire war, Revan couldn't rest while the Republic celebrated its victory. Convinced something greater lurked beyond known space, he and Malak followed the scattered clues into the unknown regions. The two friends had changed during the long years of fighting. Malak had become more violent and unpredictable, while Revan had grown colder and more distant. Yet they stayed together and traveled to the frozen world of Rekiad, pursuing Mandalore's final clue, a tomb buried beneath the ice. Deep inside lay the resting place of Darth Dramath II, and a datacron that confirmed their worst fears. An ancient Sith Empire still existed somewhere in the unknown regions. The enemy they thought defeated had merely been waiting, gathering strength in the darkness. The datacron pointed them toward Nathema, a world that appeared normal on star charts but held a horror beyond imagination. When they landed, they immediately felt something was terribly wrong. The Force itself was absent from this place. Walking across Nathema was like stepping into a void where life had never existed. No plants, no animals, no insects. Nothing at all remained. For two Jedi who had spent their lives feeling the Force flowing through everything, the sensation was like suddenly going deaf and blind. They uncovered the story of what had happened here. In 4999 BBY, a Sith Lord named Vitiate had convinced thousands of Sith to participate in a massive ritual that consumed all life on Nathema to grant him immortality and incredible power. Every living thing on an entire planet had died to feed one man's hunger for eternal life. From Nathema, the trail led them to Dromund Kaas, capital of the reconstituted Sith Empire, where Lord Vitiate now ruled as the immortal Sith Emperor. Disguising themselves as mercenaries, they spent months gathering intelligence. What they learned terrified them. The Emperor commanded millions of soldiers, thousands of Sith warriors, and vast fleets that rivaled the entire Republic Navy in size. Any reasonable person would have returned to warn the Republic, but Revan and Malak were no longer reasonable men. They convinced themselves that they could handle the Sith Emperor alone. When they finally confronted him in his throne room, he was waiting for them. But instead of the epic lightsaber battle they expected, something far worse happened. The Emperor didn't even stand up. With casual ease, he reached into their minds and broke them completely. The Emperor gave them new names, Darth Revan and Darth Malak, and sent them back to Republic space with a mission: find the ancient Star Forge and prepare for his invasion. But the Emperor had made one critical mistake. He underestimated their strength of will, and that mistake would come back to haunt him. The Dark Lord's reign. Something incredible happened that had never occurred in galactic history. Servants of the Sith Emperor broke free from his mental control for the first time ever. Revan and Malak's personalities were twisted to the dark side, but their wills remained their own, and they had plans the Emperor never saw coming. Using the Republic forces that had followed them into the unknown regions, Revan created a completely new kind of Sith Empire. Unlike previous Sith who relied on ancient bloodlines, he built a system where ability mattered more than heritage. The best fighters rose to the top, regardless of where they came from. The Star Forge became the heart of his empire. This ancient station drew stellar energy to mass-produce warships, rolling out fresh armadas in a matter of weeks. As a military commander, Darth Revan was terrifyingly effective, but his strategy was different. He didn't want to destroy the Republic, but conquer it. Malak began to resent his master, believing Revan was too soft. Their philosophical differences erupted into violence during a lightsaber duel aboard Revan's flagship, a fight that ended with Malak's jaw being destroyed, leaving him scarred and bitter. From that moment, their friendship was dead. The war raged for years. The Sith Republic seemed unstoppable as they conquered world after world. The Republic military was in chaos, the Jedi Order was falling apart, and morale was non-existent. Finally, the Jedi Council set a desperate trap. They sent a small Republic fleet as bait, while a strike team led by Bastila Shan infiltrated Revan's flagship to capture the Dark Lord. The plan worked too well. As Revan battled the Jedi on his command bridge, Malak saw his chance. He ordered his own ship to fire on his master's vessel, betraying Revan at the worst possible moment. The explosions left Revan critically wounded, his body broken and his mind shattered. But Bastila Shan made a choice that would change everything. Redemption's price. Instead of letting Revan die, Bastila Shan saved his life with the Force, pouring her own life energy into his broken body. In doing so, she formed a powerful Force bond between them, a connection that would prove crucial to everything that followed. The Jedi Council faced a problem they had never dealt with before. They had captured the Dark Lord of the Sith himself, but he was barely alive and might never recover. His body was healing, but his mind remained shattered. Master Vrook wanted him executed immediately. The risk was too great. Others argued for imprisonment on a secure world. But Masters Vandar and Zar proposed something radical. They would wipe Revan's memory completely and give him a new identity. It was experimental, dangerous, and ethically questionable. But it offered hope. It was a violation of everything the Jedi claimed to believe about free will and redemption. The Council debated for hours, knowing their decision would set a precedent for the Order. But with the galaxy burning around them, they chose the practical path over their principles. Using techniques that bordered on the forbidden, they erased everything that made Revan who he was, his memories, his personality, even his knowledge of the Force. They replaced it with the artificial personality of a loyal Republic soldier, complete with false memories that felt completely real. When he awoke on the medical frigate, the most powerful Sith Lord in history, believed himself to be a common trooper. The Council's plan was simple: use Bastila's bond with Revan to slowly draw out his buried memories of the Starforge's location, then destroy it and end the war. They had no idea how wrong things would go. Everything went sideways when Malak attacked the Endar Spire above the planet Taurus, hunting for Bastila because her battle meditation was the key to Republic resistance. Her ability to strengthen allies and weaken enemies through the Force made her the most valuable Jedi alive. During the chaotic battle, Revan escaped in a pod with Republic pilot Carth Onasi. Bastila's pod crashed elsewhere on the planet's surface, and she was captured by the Black Vulkar swoop gang. Without her battle meditation, the Republic fleet was forced to retreat. What followed was an adventure that would slowly awaken the hero buried within the former Dark Lord. As Revan fought to rescue Bastila from the criminal underworld of Taurus, something incredible happened. Given a blank slate, the man who had conquered half the galaxy consistently chose to be a protector of the innocent. When faced with choosing between personal gain and helping others, he chose compassion. When offered power at the cost of others' suffering, he refused. The quest for redemption. The rescue from Taurus was just the beginning. After Malak destroyed the planet's surface in a fit of rage, killing millions to prevent Bastila's escape, Revan was taken to the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine, where he was retrained as a Padawan at an incredible pace. His natural connection to the Force was undeniable, and Master Zar Lestin was amazed at how quickly Revan relearned abilities that should have taken years to master. Even without his memories, muscle memory and instinct guided him through complex Force techniques. His mission? Find 5 star maps created by the ancient Rakata that would lead to the Starforge. Only by destroying his own ultimate weapon could the Republic hope to survive the Sith attack. The quest took him across 5 worlds, each one a test of his character and resolve that would reveal who he truly was beneath the surface. On Tatooine, he encountered the Sand People and chose diplomacy over violence, using the protocol droid HK-47 to negotiate a peaceful solution that ended raids on moisture farmers. On Kashyyyk, he helped the Wookiee Zalbar reclaim his honor and overthrow his corrupt brother instead of supporting the easier path of working with slavers. On Manan, he protected the ocean world's ecosystem rather than exploiting it for military advantage. On Korriban, he infiltrated the Sith Academy and turned Sith teachings against themselves, convincing fallen Jedi to abandon the dark side. Each choice revealed a pattern. Given the freedom to decide, Revan consistently chose compassion over conquest, justice over convenience, and light over darkness. Meanwhile, his bond with Bastila deepened as what had begun as a strategic alliance slowly became something more. Despite the Jedi Code's restrictions on attachment, the two fell in love, and their connection gave them strength in the Force, but also made them vulnerable. Revan also gathered an unlikely crew of allies who would become some of the most loyal friends he'd ever known. Carth Onasi, a Republic pilot haunted by his mentor's betrayal. Mission Vao, a teenage Twi'lek with street smarts and unwavering loyalty. Zalbar, a Wookiee warrior bound by a life debt. Juhani, a fallen Cathar Jedi whom Revan personally saved from the dark side. Jolee Bindo, an eccentric hermit who understood the Force in the ways the Council never taught. Each companion chose to follow Revan not because of his authority or power, but because of his character. They saw someone worth believing in. But the past has a way of catching up with even the most carefully buried secrets. Admiral Saul Karath, Carth's former mentor who had defected to the Sith, captured the Ebon Hawk using an interdictor cruiser. In the torture chambers of the massive warship Leviathan, Karath began systematically breaking down Revan's companions to get to Bastila. The revelation came during Karath's dying moments. Malak confronted his former master face to face for the first time since his betrayal, revealing that Revan had once been the Dark Lord, and that Malak had taken his place. The revelation shattered everything Revan thought he knew about himself. How could he face his companions, knowing he was responsible for so much death and suffering? How could he trust himself not to fall again? The dark truth revealed. Learning that he had once been Darth Revan devastated the redeemed Jedi more than any physical wound ever could. The knowledge that he had been responsible for the very war tearing the galaxy apart, that he had corrupted Jedi and killed innocents, that his own creations were now being used against the Republic. It was almost too much to bear. But his friends surprised him with their loyalty and understanding that went beyond anything he could have expected from people he had wronged so deeply. Mission Vao simply said she trusted the person she'd traveled with, not the Dark Lord from history. She knew who he really was. Jolie Bindo revealed he'd known all along and still chose to follow him without hesitation. The old Jedi believed the Force doesn't make mistakes. If Revan were meant to stay dark, he would have. Even Carth Onasi, whose homeworld of Telos had been bombed by Revan's forces during the war, eventually found it in himself to forgive. It wasn't easy. Carth struggled with anger and betrayal, the same emotions that had driven him since his wife's death. But in the end, he chose to judge Revan by his actions as the man he traveled with, not the Sith Lord he'd once been. They saw something the Jedi Council had missed, Revan's capacity for genuine change and growth. The greater tragedy was Bastila's sacrifice during their escape from the Leviathan, when she remained behind and sealed herself on the wrong side of a blast door to save Revan from Malak's trap. Subjected to days of torture and the seductive whispers of the dark side, the woman who had saved Revan fell to the very darkness she had helped him escape. When Revan finally found her again on Lahan, Bastila had become everything she once fought against. Crimson lightsaber in hand, Sith robes replacing her Jedi garments, she offered him a choice that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Bastila urged him to reclaim his power as a Sith Lord. They could rule the galaxy together, bringing order to chaos and strength to the weak. The Jedi Council had used him, manipulated him, violated his very mind. For a moment, the galaxy's fate hung in the balance as all of Revan's power, all of his knowledge, everything that had made him the most feared Sith Lord in history, called to him. The dark side offered him everything he had lost and more: unlimited power, revenge against those who had wronged him, and the chance to reshape the galaxy according to his will. But love proved stronger than fear. Revan refused the dark side's call and chose to save the woman he loved instead of claiming his former power. Through their Force bond, the same connection that had redeemed him, he reached out to Bastila with compassion instead of conquest, telling her that even the darkest soul could be redeemed, just as he had been. Their love was stronger than any darkness. The declaration that followed broke through years of Sith conditioning and brought Bastila back to the light, proving that connection could heal even the deepest wounds. The final duel. The confrontation between Revan and Malak took place in the heart of the Starforge itself, where among the weapons of infinite destruction Revan had created during his time as a Sith Lord, master and apprentice would settle their conflict once and for all. But this battle would reveal something about Revan that even he didn't know, something that would send him on a journey far more dangerous than anything he had faced before. The Starforge was more than just a factory. It was a monument to the dark side's power and corruption that fed on the emotions of those who used it. Drawing energy from the nearby star, it could produce entire fleets in days, but it also consumed the dark feelings of anyone who commanded its power. Malak had been eaten alive by its influence, becoming more machine than man in his quest for power. Malak had learned from their previous encounters and prepared accordingly for this final showdown. Using technology salvaged from the Starforge, he had trapped the life forces of Jedi captured during his assault on the Dantooine Enclave in special machines throughout the station. Whenever Revan wounded him, Malak could drain their energy to restore himself, turning their sacrifice into fuel for his own survival. It was a twisted form of the very compassion that defined the Jedi. Their willingness to sacrifice for others turned into a weapon against them. Each time Malak healed himself, another Jedi spirit was consumed, their final moments spent empowering the very evil they had died fighting. But Revan was no longer the same person who had built this place, and he had learned the value of strategy over brute force, wisdom over raw power. Instead of trying to match Malak's strength with strength, he used his superior tactical thinking to turn the situation to his advantage. One by one, he destroyed the machinery holding the captured Jedi, freeing their spirits from torment while cutting off Malak's power source. It was dangerous work. Each machine was heavily guarded, and Malak fought desperately to prevent their destruction. Malak accused his former master of weakness, claiming he could have infinite power but chose to limit himself. Revan responded that power without purpose was meaningless, something he had learned through painful experience. When the last machine was destroyed, it came down to what it had always been. Two men that had once been the closest of friends, now separated by choices that could never be undone. The duel was epic in scope, but intimate in meaning, with every clash of lightsabers carrying the weight of their shared history. Every forced push and pull reflected the different paths they had chosen. Malak seeking control through fear, Revan finding strength through connection with others. They fought across multiple levels of the Starforge's command center. While Malak's raw power was incredible, enhanced by years of drawing on the dark side, Revan's technique and tactical awareness gave him the edge he needed. In the end, wisdom defeated power, and Malak fell, mortally wounded by a lightsaber strike that finally broke through his defenses. As he lay dying, the anger and hatred that had kept him going for so long began to fade, revealing glimpses of the young Jedi he had once been. With his final breath, Malak admitted that he alone was responsible for his fate and acknowledged that ruling the galaxy was never meant to be his destiny. Revan apologized for starting him on this dark path, but reminded him that he had chosen to continue down it. With Malak's death, the immediate threat was over, but Revan's victory came with a terrible realization. Fragments of his memory were returning, and with them, knowledge of a threat far greater than anything the Republic had ever faced. The Sith Emperor was still out there, and Revan remembered exactly what he was planning to do. What he left behind. With Malak's death and the Starforge's destruction, the Jedi Civil War was over, and the massive space station that had threatened to tip the balance of power forever was reduced to debris orbiting Lahan's star. The Republic had survived, and Revan was hailed as its savior. He received the Cross of Glory, the Republic's highest honor, from Admiral Forn Dodonna herself. Master Vandar proclaimed him the Prodigal Knight, a Jedi who had strayed from the path but found his way back to the light. But Revan's greatest victory was personal when he and Bastila were married in a simple ceremony that defied Jedi tradition completely. They believed that their love made them stronger rather than weaker, that their emotional bond was a source of light rather than darkness. For a brief time, they found peace in a modest apartment on Coruscant where Revan attempted to share his new understanding of the Force with the Jedi Council. His belief was that positive emotions could strengthen one's connection to the light side, rather than leading to corruption as the Jedi had always taught. The Council rejected his teachings completely. Several masters argued for his banishment from the Order, fearing that his philosophy would lead other Jedi astray and destroy everything they had built over thousands of years. Only his status as a war hero prevented more extreme measures from being taken against him. A compromise was reached. Revan and Bastila could remain as official Jedi and keep their marriage, but Revan was forbidden from spreading his beliefs to other members of the Order. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Revan decided it wasn't a battle worth fighting at that moment. That peace couldn't last forever, and 3 years after the war's end, Revan began experiencing vivid nightmares of a storm-covered world and an overwhelming presence of evil in the unknown regions. The memories of his time as a Sith were returning gradually, and with them came knowledge of threats the Republic wasn't prepared to face. The nightmares were incredibly detailed. He saw a world perpetually covered in lightning, felt an ancient evil that made even the Starforge's dark influence seem weak by comparison. Something was coming, something that made his own fall to the dark side seem insignificant, and it was getting stronger every day. When Bastila told him she was pregnant with their son, Revan faced an impossible choice that would define the rest of his life. Stay with his growing family and live in happiness, knowing that future generations would pay the price for his inaction, or venture into the unknown to face a threat that might not emerge for decades or even centuries. The decision tore him apart because he wanted nothing more than to hold his child, to teach his son about the Force, to grow old with the woman he loved. But the visions were getting stronger, and he could feel the dark presence in the unknown regions growing more active with each passing day. In his final conversation with Bastila before leaving everything behind, Revan explained that he wasn't doing this for the Republic, or for her, or for even himself. He was doing it for their child and future generations. It was the choice of a true hero, sacrificing personal happiness for the greater good, even when that good might never be recognized or appreciated by anyone. Revan departed for the unknown regions alone, leaving behind his pregnant wife and the son he would never know. Bastila named their child Vanner, an anagram of his father's chosen name, and every night she dreamed of her husband, sensing through their bond that he was still alive, but in terrible danger. The Republic celebrated peace, while its greatest hero walked into darkness to face an enemy that no one else even knew existed. But Revan's journey into the unknown regions would lead him to question everything he thought he knew about the Force. The Emperor's Prisoner. Revan's quest led him back to Nathema, the lifeless world where the Sith Emperor had first gained his terrible power. But this time, the Emperor was ready for him and had set a trap. Using Lord Scourge and Darth Nihilus as his helpers, Revan was taken to a secret prison called Maelstrom Prison in the heart of the Maelstrom Nebula, hung in a specially made chamber that kept him alive but helpless. For 300 years, he stayed between life and death, while being tortured by the Dreadmasters who loved breaking strong minds. But even in prison, Revan's will stayed strong despite centuries of pain that would have destroyed weaker people. The Emperor tried to steal Revan's knowledge of the Republic and the Force, but Revan fought back with everything he had, protecting the secrets that could doom billions. The Force ghost of Mitra Surik, his former general from the Mandalorian Wars, stayed by his side through the centuries of prison time and became the only thing that kept him sane. Her presence reminded him of who he had been before the darkness took over everything around him. Through their connection, Revan was able to change the Emperor's actions in small ways that the immortal Sith Lord never even knew were happening. When the Sith Empire finally attacked the Republic in 3681 BBY, starting with the Great Galactic War, Revan's influence made the Emperor want a fake peace rather than the total conquest that would have left the galaxy in ruins. The Treaty of Coruscant that ended the war in 3653 BBY was partly Revan's doing. His mental influence convinced the Emperor to accept a tie rather than continue the costly fighting that was draining both sides. For just over a decade, this uneasy Cold War continued, giving the Republic time to rebuild their forces and prepare for what might come next. But the torture hurt even Revan's incredible willpower. The constant suffering forced him to split his awareness from the pain, creating a divide that would have terrible results later. Part of him pulled back into pure focus on the Force, while another part lived through the suffering and slowly filled with hatred for his enemy. When Republic forces finally freed him from Maelstrom Prison in 3642 BBY, the man they saved was not the same hero who had left Coruscant 3 centuries earlier to face an unknown threat. The trauma had changed him in basic ways that no one could have predicted. The Revan who came out of prison was both more and less than the man who had entered it. His power had grown during his time there, but so had his pain and anger. The hero who had once chosen love over power, light over darkness, was about to make choices that would shake the galaxy to its core. But this was only the beginning of Revan's final change, and the worst was yet to come for both him and everyone he had once fought to protect. The Fractured Mind. After 3 centuries of torture, Revan's mind had finally broken under the pressure, and when Republic forces freed him from the Emperor's prison, they found a man consumed by a single thought: destroying the Sith Emperor at any cost. Revan took control of the Foundry, an ancient Rakatan space station capable of building endless armies of war droids with incredible speed and efficiency. His plan was terrifyingly simple: build an army of killer droids programmed to exterminate anyone who served the Emperor and carried his dark side signature. It didn't matter that this would mean genocide for billions of innocent people throughout the Sith Empire who had done nothing wrong. In Revan's broken mind, they were all guilty by blood alone. He placed his old companion HK-47 in command of the droid army, and the killer droid's programming was perfectly suited to this new mission of mass murder. HK-47 was delighted to return to his killing protocols on such a massive scale that would make his previous work seem small. When an Imperial strike team finally reached Revan in the heart of the Foundry, they found a broken man who had become everything he once fought against. The former savior of the galaxy was now willing to commit genocide in the name of the greater good. Revan declared that the Emperor must die, and everything else came second to that goal as he fought the strike team with powers fueled by 3 centuries of hatred and pain. The strike team beat him after a long and brutal battle, but Revan's story didn't end with his apparent death on the cold metal floors of the Foundry. After his defeat, the torture he had lived through had literally split his spirit in 2 like a cracked mirror. Part of him, the wise, caring Jedi, became one with the Force and found peace at last. But the other part, driven by hatred and obsessed with destroying the Emperor, held on to life and refused to pass on to whatever came next. This dark piece of Revan's soul took control of his body, which was kept alive by hatred and dark side power that flowed through him like poison. Gathering followers who worshipped him as a prophet who could save them from the Emperor's rule, the Dark Revan began planning complicated schemes to force the Emperor to take physical form so he could be destroyed forever. He founded the Order of Revan, converting both Republic and Imperial agents to his cause with promises of power and revenge. But this dark version of Revan was only a shadow of the man who had once saved the galaxy, driven by pain and hatred rather than love and hope. His plans would ultimately fail, but not before causing incredible damage to both the Republic and Empire that he had once fought to protect. The hero who had once chosen redemption over revenge, who had saved Bastila from the dark side through love, was now trapped in a cycle of hatred that seemed impossible to break. But somewhere in the Force, the light side of Revan waited, hoping that somehow his other half could find peace before it was too late. The final redemption. The Dark Revan's plans ultimately led him to Yavin 4, where the Sith Emperor's spirit had gone to hide and recover from his recent defeat. In the ancient temples of that jungle moon, Revan planned to perform a ritual that would force the Emperor into physical form, making him weak enough to kill permanently. When Republic and Imperial forces joined together to stop him, the Dark Revan made his final stand in the Temple of Sacrifice. There, he was faced not only by his enemies, but by his own light side, appearing as a Force spirit to beg his fallen half to stop this madness. The light side spirit told his dark half that hatred had consumed his wisdom and compassion. The fight was as much about ideas as it was about lightsabers and force powers. The light side spirit argued for balance and saving people, while the dark side piece insisted that any sacrifice was justified to stop the Emperor's evil. The Dark Revan was shocked to realize that his plans had actually given the Emperor exactly what he needed to become strong again. Everything the Dark Revan had done had only made things worse. The two halves of his spirit, light and dark, wisdom and power, came together once more, becoming whole for the first time in centuries. In his final moments, Revan spoke of the Force's need for balance, finally at peace after centuries of suffering. He warned the gathered heroes to remain vigilant against the Emperor's return, then faded into the Force. Years later, when the Emperor made his final attempt at ultimate power, Revan's spirit appeared alongside all those murdered by the ancient Sith. Together, they accomplished what the living Revan never could, the complete destruction of the Emperor's essence. Only then did Revan truly become one with the Force as one of the most powerful ancient Sith Lords to ever live.
Number 3 is the only Sith on this list most of the audience already knows. But the Emperor from the films was only half of what Palpatine was capable of. Decades after he died above Endor, the Legends comic Dark Empire by Tom Veitch picked the story back up. Sidious had pulled his own soul into a clone body before the throne room ever happened, and when Vader threw him down the reactor shaft, the soul went somewhere it had been waiting to go. The version of Palpatine in those comics is why he sits this high.
Sheev was a young man when his father, Kosinga Palpatine, pushed him too far during a confrontation aboard the family yacht. For years, Kosinga had been a controlling tyrant who ruled every part of his family's lives. He sensed something dangerous in his eldest son and answered it with constant cruelty and humiliation. He mocked Sheev's ambitions, insulted his intelligence, and treated him as a disgrace to the Palpatine name. But Sheev was no longer the powerless boy who had endured those years of contempt. By this time, he had already met the wealthy banker Hago Damask, who saw potential in him where others saw only arrogance. Damask had begun guiding Sheev, teaching him that real power was taken, not given. Under this influence, Sheev had learned to embrace his darker instincts. That night on the yacht, as Kosinga hurled more insults about his son's failures, Sheev made a choice. He would never again be his father's victim. With cold resolve, Sheev seized control of the yacht and steered it into the reef. The crash was not an accident. It was a calculated murder, executed with ruthless precision. When it was over, Kosinga, his wife, Sheev's siblings, and the crew were all dead. Only Sheev survived. He felt no horror and no regret, only a cold sense of freedom. The act cut him off from his family forever. Hago Damask's influence had prepared him for this step, showing him he was ready for the path of the Sith. From that point forward, Palpatine mastered the art of deception. Over the following decades, he perfected his double life. By day, he was the humble senator from Naboo. By night, he was the secret Sith apprentice who would one day rule the galaxy. Every friendly smile he showed in public was a lie. Every kindly word was carefully scripted. Every personal relationship was just another tool for his ambition. Everything would happen according to his design. This and all following information are drawn from both the expanded universe and canon. The making of a monster. Under Darth Plagueis' guidance, young Sidious learned something far more deadly than simple lightsaber combat. His master taught him how to influence entire civilizations through patience and deception. In these early years, Sidious wasn't yet building armies or superweapons. That would come later. First, he had to learn how to rot the Republic from within, turning the Republic's greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. The change began the moment Sidious entered the Galactic Senate as Naboo's new representative. The young man who had murdered his family in rage was carefully transformed into something more dangerous, a political weapon with the patience to plan decades ahead. Plagueis knew that creating the ultimate Sith Lord required something more than raw power. It needed complete mastery of lies on a galactic scale. Senator Palpatine's public persona became a tool of manipulation. By day, he appeared to be the perfect civil servant. He projected an image of devotion to his people, asking thoughtful questions that made others feel heard, and showed a talent for finding common ground between rivals. Colleagues considered him a rarity, a politician motivated by service rather than ambition. But every gesture was fake. Every expression of concern was planned. Every moment of apparent weakness was designed to create specific effects. Plagueis had taught him to plant ideas so cleverly in others' minds that they believed the thoughts were their own. True power came not from forcing compliance, but from making beings desire what served the Sith's purposes. As Sidious developed his craft of deception, a terrible truth was growing in their relationship. The twisted bond meant Plagueis was teaching him everything he would need to commit the ultimate betrayal. Plagueis watched these developments with growing approval. The young Sith understood what his master called the politics of inevitability. This meant creating conditions where people would naturally choose paths that served Sith interests while believing they were making free decisions. Every crisis Sidious engineered polished his image as a problem solver. Every conflict he ended expanded his influence, and every favor he granted became a debt he could one day collect. This was the most devastating aspect of Sidious's training. His master was both his ally and ultimate enemy. The Rule of Two wasn't simply a numerical limitation on Sith membership. It was designed to ensure the dark side's power through constant challenge. Each apprentice was forced to grow strong enough to eventually battle their master to the death. There could be no retirement from Sith service, no peaceful transition of power, no sharing of ultimate authority. And one day, Sidious would need to kill the being who had saved him, taught him, and shaped him into everything he had become. The relationship between Plagueis and Sidious was built on constant psychological tension. Plagueis shared ancient Sith secrets while watching for signs that his apprentice was becoming too powerful. They planned galactic conquests together, yet each privately prepared for the moment they would inevitably clash. Beneath this threat of betrayal, there was also complexity to their bond. Plagueis took pride in his apprentice's accomplishments, praising his political victories and offering guidance beyond formal instruction. Sidious, despite his increasing independence, still sought his master's approval, even as he plotted his downfall. In this way, they were father and son, teacher and student, allies and rivals, all at once. Ultimately, this complexity strengthened Sidious rather than weakening him. The constant risk of betrayal forced him to think carefully about every move, control his emotions, and sharpen the skills he would one day use to kill his master. After 11 years of training, Sidious's education expanded beyond politics to encompass the deeper mysteries of Sith philosophy and force manipulation. Plagueis' shared knowledge that had been accumulated over millennia, techniques for extending life, methods for preserving consciousness beyond death, rituals for channeling the dark side's most destructive aspects. Much of this learning took place in laboratories deep within Abora, Plagueis' private island on Nihilus, where the moon conducted his most secret experiments. The most important lesson concerned the power to conquer death itself. Plagueis believed he had discovered how to use the Force to stop people from dying, manipulating the midichlorians that animated all living things. Sidious could not be sure if this was the literal truth or symbolic teaching, but the meaning was powerful. If death could be overcome, then Sith rule could truly last forever. Meanwhile, Plagueis pursued his own obsession with immortality through increasingly dangerous experiments. His laboratories contained creatures in cages and bacta tanks, along with complex machines for studying life and death. The ancient Sith Lord believed he was close to a breakthrough that could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The relationship between master and apprentice grew increasingly complex as both prepared for their roles in the grand plan's end. Plagueis continued to share knowledge while growing increasingly suspicious of Sidious's true capabilities. Sidious absorbed everything he could learn while carefully building the political network and personal resources he would need for independent operation. By 32 BBY, both Sith Lords sensed that their chance had finally come. The Republic was showing signs of decay. The Jedi had grown overconfident after centuries of peace, and a crisis was ready to unfold. The Trade Federation's greed and Naboo's weakness created an opportunity that might not appear again for generations. Yet Sidious had already made a choice that would shape the future of the galaxy. When victory came, he would not share it. The rule of two demanded that the apprentice rise above the master, and Sidious believed his moment had arrived. All he needed was the right time to strike. Unfortunately, Plagueis, for all his wisdom and power, failed to recognize that every weapon he had forged would eventually be turned against its maker. The rise of the Chancellor. The Trade Federation's blockade of Naboo in 32 BBY looked like a simple trade dispute to everyone else. In reality, it was the opening move in Darth Sidious's bid for galactic power. The crisis had been carefully planned through months of manipulation to serve one purpose: making Senator Palpatine the Supreme Chancellor. The groundwork for this deception had been laid months earlier through a series of seemingly unrelated pressures. As detailed in Queen's Peril, a Canon novel, Sidious had introduced multiple taxation bills targeting Trade Federation shipping routes over several months. At the same time, he blocked their attempts to get relief by inserting amendments that cost the Neimoidians crucial political support. When Viceroy Newt Gunray and his advisors finally met the mysterious Sith Lord guiding them through secret messages, they believed they had found a powerful ally. Sidious seemed to share their anger at the Republic's corruption. He assured them that bold action against Naboo would later be justified through politics. What began as an illegal blockade, he promised, would soon be seen as a legal defense of corporate rights. The blockade created a crisis that ultimately contributed to the downfall of Chancellor Valorum. It created real suffering that demanded immediate action, while positioning Senator Palpatine as the voice of justice against corporate greed. The blockade was carried out with ruthless efficiency. Massive Trade Federation battleships surrounded Naboo, cutting off all shipping and communication with the wider galaxy. Naboo's limited food reserves, enough to feed the entire planet for only a week, forced Queen Amidala to implement rationing. The crisis demanded immediate action, but the Republic's Senate only offered bureaucratic delays. Queen Amidala's government found itself in an impossible position. They lacked the military resources to challenge the Trade Federation directly. Their appeals to the Republic's Senate were delayed, and their own representatives seemed as frustrated and powerless as they were. Unbeknownst to them, their trusted senator was the architect of their suffering. Sidious coordinated his actions as the Sith and as Senator Palpatine at the same time. As the mysterious Sith Lord, he directed Trade Federation military operations through encrypted holographic communications. His face was hidden in shadow, and his voice electronically distorted. As Senator Palpatine, he publicly condemned the blockade while privately working to ensure that meaningful relief would be impossible through normal political channels. Sidious carefully coordinated each command with his public persona. When the Jedi Council sent Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi as negotiators, Sidious faced both opportunity and risk. Jedi involvement made the situation appear more serious and increased pressure for resolution. However, it also meant Force-sensitive investigators would be studying a crisis he had secretly engineered. To protect his plans, he acted quickly. By ordering the Jedi killed as soon as they arrived, the Sith Lord showed his readiness to use violence whenever needed to secure his goals. Although the attempt on their lives failed, it still worked to his advantage. It destroyed any chance of a peaceful outcome. It pushed the Jedi into open conflict. It created the urgency that would drive Queen Amidala into desperate action. The deployment of Darth Maul represented perhaps the greatest risk Sidious had taken since the beginning of his political career. Years before the Naboo crisis, the Dark Lord had begun preparing for the violent phase of his plan through the acquisition and training of a deadly weapon. A Zabrak child from the planet Dathomir. The boy, Maul, had come to Sidious as a child, a gift from his mother, the Night Sister Witch Mother Talzin, as part of an arrangement that Sidious would later betray. The transaction left Talzin with a grudge that ran deep, having surrendered her son for promises that were never kept. For Sidious, the result was ideal. A Force-sensitive boy young enough to be molded completely, with no competing loyalties or moral foundations to overcome. The separation was calculated and cruel, exploiting a mother's ambitions to sever a family bond and create a weapon of pure hatred. Sidious subjected the young Zabrak to relentless conditioning, psychological manipulation, and exposure to the dark side's most corrupting influences. Pain became Maul's teacher. Survival, his only goal. Rage was shaped into focus, desperation into strength, and abandonment into absolute loyalty. Maul's early missions tested his conditioning while advancing Sidious's political schemes. He eliminated rivals who could not be bought or manipulated. He gathered intelligence on Jedi movements and Republic military capabilities. He struck terror into criminal organizations that refused to cooperate with Sith plans. Each success earned him nothing more than the privilege of serving again. The relationship between master and apprentice was built on fear, not affection. Sidious offered no warmth, no genuine guidance, no hope of eventual independence. Maul existed to be used and, when necessary, discarded. This dynamic shaped how they worked together for over a decade, creating a tool made for the kind of violence needed in the grand plan. As the crisis deepened and Queen Amidala escaped Naboo to seek help on Coruscant, Sidious prepared for the most delicate phase of his manipulation. The young queen would need to be convinced that Chancellor Valorum's government was too corrupt and ineffective to save her people. This conviction would have to arise naturally from her own observations rather than direct suggestion. Her call for new leadership had to appear to be her own idea. If Amidala called for change, Sidious's rise would be unstoppable. The vote of no confidence proceeded exactly as Sidious had calculated. Valorum's government, already weakened by previous scandals and government failures, proved unable to provide decisive leadership. Compared to the suffering of Naboo's people, the Chancellor's slow diplomacy seemed weak. That's why, when Queen Amidala called for new leadership, her voice carried undeniable power in the Senate. The election campaign revealed Sidious's skill at political theater. While his rivals, Ainley Team of Malastare and Bail Antilles of Alderaan, relied on experience and established networks, Palpatine presented himself as a humble servant, forced into prominence by tragedy. His speeches stressed duty over ambition, service over power, and competence over ideology. Every detail of his public persona was designed to exploit the biases of the Senate and galactic media. His seeming reluctance to seek higher office made him appear trustworthy. His understanding of the Naboo crisis showed he could handle pressure. His modest background and soft-spoken manner suggested he would respect democratic oversight more than career politicians. The election results marked a decisive win for both Palpatine and the Sith Grand Plan. As Supreme Chancellor, he gained unprecedented support, a mandate for reform, and the trust of colleagues. Yet Sidious's greatest triumph came that very night. In Darth Plagueis, a Legends novel by James Luceno, the newly elected Chancellor visited his master at Plagueis's Coruscant residence. The ancient moon, drunk with celebration, had let down his guard. The irony was perfect. The being who had taught Sidious everything about betrayal had made himself vulnerable at the peak of their shared victory. The murder of Darth Plagueis was accomplished with calculated cruelty. Sidious attacked with Force lightning, targeting his master's breathing device. The lightning destroyed the transpirator, suffocating Plagueis. Though the moon tried to gather the Force to defend himself, he was too intoxicated and oxygen-deprived to resist. Sidious struck again and again until his master died. The death fulfilled the most sacred tradition of the Sith rule of two. At the precise instant Sidious assumed leadership of the Galactic Republic, he also became the sole Dark Lord of the Sith. The galaxy's democratic institutions had unknowingly placed their greatest enemy in charge of the very government designed to protect them. The Jedi Council, despite their growing sense that the dark side was somehow involved in recent events, they had no idea their ultimate enemy now controlled the state they served. The resolution of the Naboo crisis marked a crucial step in Sidious's rise to power. The Battle of Naboo ended with the Trade Federation defeated, Queen Amidala freed, and the mysterious Sith who had threatened the galaxy seemingly dead. To most in the Republic, it looked like good had won through democracy and Jedi protection. However, Sidious had orchestrated these events to his advantage. Darth Maul's apparent death left the Jedi uncertain about the Sith threat. Though they suspected another Sith might exist, they had no idea it was Palpatine, allowing Sidious to operate freely. The Legends novelization of The Phantom Menace by Terry Brooks reveals that Sidious was furious and bitter about losing his apprentice, blaming bad luck and chance for Maul's defeat. However, he considered the loss acceptable. He had achieved his primary goal of becoming Supreme Chancellor. He vowed that those responsible for Maul's death would be held accountable, while recognizing the need to find and train a new apprentice. Maul's apparent death showed how Sidious truly viewed his servants. Within hours of confirming his apprentice's fate, the Sith Lord had already begun considering replacements. The ease with which he moved on from Maul's apparent death foreshadowed how he would treat all future apprentices. Count Dooku, despite his noble heritage and political value, would prove equally expendable when his usefulness ended. Even Anakin Skywalker, the prophesied chosen one, would be valued only for what he could provide rather than who he was. To the Sith Lord, people only mattered if they could help him win. Engineering the Clone Wars. The 10 years after Palpatine became Supreme Chancellor saw the Republic slowly slide toward crisis. What seemed like normal political problems was actually the careful work of Darth Sidious, orchestrating the next phase of his plan to destroy both the Republic and the Jedi Order. Between the Naboo crisis and the Clone Wars outbreak, Sidious coordinated deception across the entire galaxy while maintaining his public role as Chancellor. This required managing multiple schemes at once, each designed to advance his agenda while appearing to be natural political developments. During his early years as Chancellor, Palpatine steadily increased his power using legal procedures. He started by promising to fix corruption and protect democracy. Each Senate meeting became a chance to show himself as a reluctant guardian of the Republic, even as his control quietly grew. Palpatine's skill with Senate rules was key to his rise. He knew how to use delays, debate schedules, and voting procedures to get the results he wanted. When opponents challenged him, he would bring in testimony from affected worlds or reveal intelligence to push for immediate action. He also built connections with important senators from both core and frontier worlds. The Trade Federation still held power in the Senate, giving Palpatine plenty of chances to manipulate events. Even after the Naboo crisis, corporate leaders like Lot Dodd kept their seats. Palpatine fueled arguments over trade routes and taxes, pretending to be the peacemaker while secretly setting up the very problems he then solved. Regional tensions also worked in his favor. Core world senators worried about attacks from the Outer Rim, while frontier systems grew angry at taxes they paid for core world projects. Palpatine made these divisions worse by placing allies in key committees, so every argument grew into a crisis that only strong leadership, his leadership, could resolve. The turning point came in 22 BBY, when Jar Jar Binks, serving as Naboo's junior representative, proposed giving Palpatine emergency powers to face the Separatist threat. The motion passed quickly, with strong support from senators whose worlds felt in danger. Palpatine's speech showed false humility, as he claimed to accept these powers reluctantly, but in reality, he was laying the legal foundation to concentrate authority in his office. These temporary powers soon became permanent. With every new crisis, the Senate let Palpatine keep more control. Bit by bit, senators voted away their own power, handing it to the Chancellor. At the same time, Palpatine built relationships that would serve his plans. From his first meeting with Anakin Skywalker, he showed special interest in the boy, making time for personal conversations despite his busy schedule. These conversations were carefully planned. Palpatine listened to Anakin's complaints about Jedi training, agreed with his frustrations about the Council's caution, and subtly encouraged bolder decisions. When Anakin struggled with the Jedi Code's rules about attachment, the Chancellor offered understanding instead of criticism, making him seem more sympathetic than the Order. Anakin found these meetings refreshing. Here was someone who valued his opinions and didn't dismiss his concerns as signs of impatience or arrogance. While the Jedi Council often seemed distant and disapproving, Palpatine made him feel heard and appreciated. With his political foundation secure, Sidious turned to building the tools of war. After eliminating Plagueis, he needed a new apprentice. He chose Count Dooku, a former Jedi Master who had lost faith in both the Republic and the Jedi Order. Dooku's noble background, knowledge of galactic politics, and frustration with Senate corruption made him suitable for Sidious's plan. His transformation from respected Jedi Master to Sith Lord occurred over several years. He had left the Jedi Order in 42 BBY following disagreements about the Order's role in galactic politics. His departure to reclaim his family's position on Sereno provided cover for his corruption by Sidious, which began during this period. By 32 BBY, his transformation into Darth Tyrannus was complete. During the Clone Wars, Sidious learned that his first apprentice had survived the battle on Naboo, a survival he had not anticipated. Maul's apparent death had been an illusion born of desperate will and dark side power. His bisected body had fallen into the depths of Theed's reactor shaft, yet his hatred and rage kept him alive. For over a decade in exile, he survived on sheer will, sustained by mechanical augmentation and his consuming desire for revenge. In that time, Maul had slowly rebuilt his strength, making deals with criminal gangs and bringing in his brother, Savage Opress, to help him. But these moves made the Sith's secret plans more visible. When Maul became too bold, Sidious acted without mercy. He faced the brothers himself, showing the huge difference between a true Sith Lord and those who only thought they had power. The fight was short and brutal. Savage fell quickly, and Maul was captured alive, his resistance crushed by his former master's overwhelming strength. The confrontation revealed how little Sidious had ever cared for his first apprentice. Years of separation had not diminished his contempt. If anything, Maul's survival and independence were viewed as evidence of failure rather than strength. The master who had once shaped a child into a weapon now saw only a broken tool that had outlived its usefulness. Sidious's cruelty became evident in how he chose to exploit Maul's remaining connections. Learning of the Zabrak's bond with his mother, Talzin, the Dark Lord orchestrated events that would draw the ancient Night Sister into the open. Through the manipulation, he created circumstances where Talzin would sacrifice herself to save her son from Sidious's control. The death of Mother Talzin eliminated both a potential threat and Maul's last source of emotional connection. Watching his mother die to protect him, Maul finally understood how ruthless his master truly was. Sidious had stolen his childhood and ensured the destruction of his family, turning their bond into a weapon against them both. This exploitation of family loyalty demonstrated Sidious's willingness to corrupt even the most basic emotional connections in the service of his dominance. Every relationship became a tool, and every bond of affection a weakness to use against others. Maul's suffering served Sidious's plans and reminded everyone that he had total control over his former servants. Meanwhile, another piece of Sidious's grand design was taking shape. The Camino Clone Army project had originally been commissioned by Jedi Master Sith Order, whose sources indicate had the gift of foresight. Available records suggest he saw a massive conflict approaching the Republic and secretly arranged for the Republic's defense. However, Sith Order died before he could explain the plan to the Jedi Council, leaving the project shrouded in mystery. Dooku, operating under the alias Darth Tyrannus, likely assumed control of the clone project, though the exact details of how he managed the Kaminoans are not fully documented. He presented himself to Prime Minister Lama Su as Sith Order's representative. The Kaminoans, focused on their scientific work and financial reward, accepted this arrangement. The cloning process on Camino represented advanced genetic engineering. Prime Minister Lama Su and his team produced soldiers who matured at double speed. The facilities in Tipoca City created thousands of clones simultaneously, with controlled environments ensuring consistent quality. According to military records, specialized variants were developed beyond standard infantry. These included advanced recon commandos trained for independence and problem-solving, and Republic commandos instructed in demolition and covert warfare. Clone pilots received enhanced training optimized for starfighter combat. All clones followed training programs that involved veteran mercenaries, including Mandalorians, across multiple combat environments. They practiced urban warfare, space combat simulations, and live fire exercises. By deployment, every clone trooper was supposedly as skilled as a veteran soldier, despite their artificial origins. Each trooper would soon face battles their creators could never imagine. The clones were conditioned to obey orders unquestioningly, though the exact methods used to ensure this obedience were not fully known to the Jedi at the time. This absolute loyalty would prove crucial to Sidious's ultimate plan. While Dooku served as his military instrument, Sidious also needed a public movement to justify the coming war. When Dooku became the public face of the Separatists, the stage was set. Dooku's noble bearing and reputation for integrity attracted systems frustrated with Senate inefficiency. His speeches struck a balance, enough truth about corruption to be convincing, but framed to serve the Sith's broader plan. As leader of the Separatist movement, Dooku began pulling countless star systems to his side. His past as a Jedi made his warnings about Republic corruption sound believable, and his political ties gave him influence across the Outer Rim. Many planets that felt forgotten by Coruscant saw Dooku as a leader who truly understood their struggles. The Separatist crisis began when Dooku gave public speeches accusing the Republic of being corrupt and weak. From his homeworld of Sereno, he pointed to real examples of the Senate's failures and its favoritism toward the core worlds. His famous Raxus address became the Separatist movement's founding document, listing grievances that had built up for decades. Planet after planet began leaving the Republic for familiar reasons. Farm worlds argued that trade laws favored core world buyers over Outer Rim farmers. Factory systems complained about rules made by senators who had never even seen a factory. Mining colonies demanded more say in government, pointing to the wealth they provided. Each grievance was real, which made Dooku's movement seem like a natural democratic answer to problems that had festered for years. As a result, the Separatist cause gained momentum, with more and more systems joining for the promise of independence and fair representation. At the same time, major corporations supplied the movement with resources. The Trade Federation, still bitter over Naboo, brought its fleets and droid armies. The Techno Union added factories and weapons. The banking clan provided financial support while pretending to stay neutral. Meanwhile, corporate leaders backed the Separatists for their own reasons. Newt Gunray wanted revenge for his humiliation on Naboo. Wat Tambor sought new markets for his weapons, and San Hill of the banking clan tried to play both sides, financing the Republic's expansion while secretly funding Separatist operations. The Separatist Council was formed by powerful organizations that met in secret to plan their support. Their meetings looked like corporate board sessions, complete with agendas, as if the galactic war was just another business project. None of them realized they were only pawns in a Sith Lord's larger plan. On the other hand, the Republic's clone army was being built on Camino. The Kaminoans created soldiers using the DNA of Jango Fett. They followed strict training and used identical equipment to make the army efficient. By 22 BBY, Kamino had produced 200,000 ready-to-fight clones, with millions more on the way. The future of the galaxy now rested in the hands of soldiers who had been grown, not born. The truth behind these armies revealed the size of Sidious's conspiracy. As Chancellor, he controlled the Republic's clones. Through Dooku, he also controlled the Separatist droids. When the war began, Sidious was secretly running both sides. The first cracks in the plan appeared when Obi-Wan Kenobi investigated an attempt on Senator Amidala's life. He traced the poisoned dart used by Zam Wesell to Kamino with the help of Dexter Jettster. Obi-Wan then discovered that Kamino had been erased from the Jedi archives, proof that something was being hidden. On Coruscant, Anakin grew uneasy as his former master followed these dangerous leads. The attacks on Padme had already shaken him, and now Obi-Wan was risking his life far away. Anakin felt torn between his duty to guard Padme and his fear for Obi-Wan's safety. When Obi-Wan arrived on Kamino, the Kaminoans welcomed him as if they had been expecting him. They proudly revealed their clone army and explained the improvements that made them stronger soldiers. Prime Minister Lama Su acted as if this were nothing more than a routine inspection, hiding how carefully the deception had been planned. Taun Wei gave Obi-Wan a full tour of the facilities, showing every stage of clone development, from embryos to trained warriors. Each section of Tipoca City was dedicated to different military tasks, revealing the massive scale of the project. At the same time, Separatist leaders gathered on Geonosis to pledge their armies to Dooku. Sidious had planned the timing perfectly so that the clone army would appear just as the Republic needed it, making his scheme look like luck instead of manipulation. When word reached Coruscant that Obi-Wan had found a ready-made army, Anakin felt both relief and unease. Relief that the Republic now had a way to defend itself, but unease at the strange timing and hidden origins. His worries grew even stronger when he learned Obi-Wan was in danger on Geonosis. The assassination attempts on Padme served several purposes in Sidious's strategy. They created a crisis that justified giving him emergency powers and using the clone army. They also forced Anakin to spend time closer to Padme during a critical moment in his life. The First Battle of Geonosis in 22 BBY marked the start of the Clone Wars. A rescue mission for Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme turned into a full-scale battle when Separatist forces trapped them in the execution arena. For Anakin, watching Padme face death while he stood powerless was unbearable. It captured every fear he had about losing the people he loved. The Jedi fought bravely, but the waves of droids nearly destroyed them. According to battle records, out of 212 Jedi who entered the arena, only about 30 survived until Yoda arrived with clone reinforcements. The arrival of Republic gunships showed that peace had ended and full-scale war had begun. Clone soldiers stormed into battle under Jedi command, setting the tone for the long conflict ahead. The fight revealed both strengths and weaknesses. Clones were well-trained and well-equipped, but droids could be built far faster than clones could grow. This meant the war would drag on, exactly as Sidious intended. Sources indicate that specialized clone units proved effective in early engagements. Advanced clone scouts targeted enemy positions, while commando units carried out sabotage behind enemy lines. During the early years of the war, Sidious expanded his authority with each new crisis. The Senate granted him greater power whenever threats appeared, and core world senators supported these measures in the name of stability. Temporary powers soon became permanent, building the legal framework for authoritarian rule disguised as democracy. The pattern was predictable. A crisis arose, the Senate debated without resolution, and Palpatine reluctantly accepted more authority to end the conflict. Those who opposed him were labeled unpatriotic, while his supporters praised his strength. Democratic institutions still existed, but they had become little more than formalities that confirmed Palpatine's decisions. Early battles revealed the scale of the conflict. At Christophsis, Admiral Trench's blockade trapped Senator Organa and thousands of refugees. Republic forces eventually broke through, using new tactics and experimental technology. For Anakin, The battle was personal. His new Padawan, Ahsoka, was thrust into combat before he believed she was ready, forcing him to confront his fear of losing another student in wartime. The victory came at a heavy cost, and clone betrayal by Slick exposed the Republic's vulnerabilities. The siege also introduced new military technology. Anakin employed a prototype stealth ship to bypass Separatist defenses, and Separatist deflector shields forced clones to adapt their tactics. Both armies quickly adopted these innovations. The Ryloth campaign demonstrated the devastating toll of war on civilians. Wat Tambor's occupation forced the Twi'lek people into labor camps and stripped the planet of its resources. For the Jedi leading the assault, watching an entire population suffer under Separatist rule made the moral stakes unmistakable. This was no longer a political dispute, but a struggle to protect innocent lives. The Republic coordinated with local resistance under Cham Syndulla, proving that military victories alone could not resolve political problems. The campaign unfolded in 3 phases: space battles to break the blockade, ground assaults to defeat Separatist forces, and efforts to restore the local government. Each stage demanded different strategies, and civilians were caught in the middle. The Republic succeeded in liberating Ryloth, but the scars of occupation remained. As the war spread, Jedi Masters who had once studied diplomacy and philosophy became generals commanding fleets and armies. This shift served Sidious perfectly. By transforming Jedi into soldiers, he distanced them from their true role as guardians of peace and drew them deeper into the violence consuming the Republic. Throughout the conflict, Sidious remained both Chancellor of the Republic and the hidden master of the Separatists. He carefully balanced policies and battles so that neither side could win too quickly, reinforcing the Republic at critical moments while ensuring the Separatists received what they needed to continue fighting. The war also gave Sidious greater access to Anakin Skywalker. As Chancellor, he offered guidance that seemed to complement Jedi teachings, but quietly undermined them. Palpatine positioned himself as someone who understood Anakin's unique abilities in ways that the cautious Jedi Council did not. Palpatine frequently invited Anakin to strategy sessions, social events, and even the opera. These encounters allowed him to study Anakin's emotions while offering advice that weakened the Jedi's warnings about attachment and emotion. He praised Anakin's victories and defended him when the Council questioned his methods. Their conversations at the galaxy's opera house became especially important. In the privacy of his viewing box, Palpatine shared stories about ancient history and the uses of power, carefully observing Anakin's reactions. These talks built a sense of trust that public meetings could never provide. For Anakin, these moments felt like a refuge from the pressures of war. While other Jedi carried the weight of responsibility with hesitation, Palpatine projected certainty. His approval meant more to Anakin than he admitted, especially as the Council grew more critical of him. Palpatine made Anakin feel understood. He listened without judgment, offered practical guidance, and valued traits that the Jedi distrusted. For Anakin, this bond became one of the few sources of unconditional support in his life. Meanwhile, political opposition to Palpatine's growing authority gathered around Padme Amidala, Bail Organa, and Mon Mothma. They pushed for peace and negotiation, but their efforts failed as new battles erupted. Each crisis gave Palpatine another excuse to claim more control, and anyone who resisted him was portrayed as disloyal to the Republic. Their influence faded as emergency powers became normal. Palpatine's allies dominated key committees, and critical votes were scheduled when opposition senators were absent. The Senate still looked like a democracy, but true debate was disappearing as power bent toward Palpatine. The delegation of 2000 marked the last organized effort to stop him. Based on some accounts, it was led by Padme and Bail Organa. These senators petitioned for power to be restored to the Senate once the war ended. For Padme, watching the Republic she had sworn to serve transform into a dictatorship felt like a betrayal of everything Naboo had fought for. But their plea came too late. Palpatine already held the authority he needed, and the senators feared democracy was beyond saving. By the third year of the war, Sidious's plan was nearly complete. He had weakened both sides while establishing himself as the indispensable figure to end the conflict. The Jedi were scattered across the galaxy, vulnerable to a coordinated strike. Most importantly, Anakin Skywalker had been placed exactly where Sidious wanted him. The Republic that had once elected Palpatine as a reformer no longer existed. In its place stood a militarized state where emergency powers had become permanent and oversight had nearly vanished. The Senate still held debates and votes, but they were hollow rituals. Real democracy had been gutted from within. Clone commanders now reported directly to the Chancellor, bypassing traditional chains of command. Jedi generals were forced to carry out policies they had no say in creating. The war economy was under government control, and entire sectors of the galaxy had grown dependent on the conflict of survival. The stage was set for the final phase of Sidious's plan. Everything now depended on Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, who remained the only one capable of stopping the Sith Lord's ultimate design. The perfect solution. With the Jedi scattered and the Senate accustomed to his emergency powers, Darth Sidious put his plan into motion. In the Legends novel Revenge of the Sith by Matthew Stover, the Supreme Chancellor arranged his own capture. To the Republic, it seemed Palpatine had fallen to a daring separatist attack, yet the Dark Lord had orchestrated the entire operation himself. The kidnapping marked the end result of a decade-long strategy that had slowly weakened the Republic while preparing Sidious for absolute power. Throughout the Clone Wars, he created crises that required emergency powers, scattered the Jedi across the galaxy as military commanders, and built key relationships that would be essential to his final scheme. Sidious had chosen Count Dooku and Anakin Skywalker with care. Dooku was the perfect public leader for the Separatists. As a former Jedi with noble heritage and genuine complaints about corruption in the Republic, he gave the rebellion credibility. At the same time, his secret identity as Darth Tyrannus allowed Sidious to control both sides of the war. Anakin was even more valuable. As the prophesied Chosen One, his extraordinary power and deep emotional struggles made him the ideal target for corruption and eventual conversion to the dark side. The entire kidnapping was meant to accomplish several goals at once. Sidious intended to eliminate Count Dooku, who had outlived his usefulness, test Anakin Skywalker's loyalty through moral compromise, and create the crisis atmosphere needed for the final expansion of his powers. Every part of the rescue mission served these overlapping purposes. The battle above Coruscant displayed the Republic's military strength. Separatist forces fought with determination, never realizing their defeat was being engineered to advance Sidious's larger plans. As shown in the movie Revenge of the Sith, when Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker reached the command tower of the Invisible Hand, they found Palpatine restrained in a chair with Count Dooku standing guard. The lightsaber duel exposed Anakin's growing instability. His relentless strikes and willingness to fight with two blades revealed the anger Sidious had been nurturing for years. When Anakin finally struck Dooku down, the trap was sprung. Palpatine's urging to execute the defeated prisoner forced Anakin to cross a moral line. Dooku's death served Sidious's purpose in multiple ways. It removed a Sith apprentice who had fulfilled his purpose and could potentially expose a conspiracy. It corrupted Anakin through an act of murder committed in cold blood against a defenseless opponent. The execution revealed how well Sidious understood Anakin's mind. He knew that Anakin's anger toward Dooku, his eagerness to win the Chancellor's approval, and his fear for Palpatine's safety would outweigh his Jedi training at that decisive moment. After returning to Coruscant, Sidious continued his manipulation through conversations that built systematically on their established relationship. These exchanges followed patterns he had refined over years of observation, validating Anakin's frustrations with the Jedi Council, encouraging his emotional responses, and positioning himself as the understanding mentor who truly appreciated Anakin's potential. The most important of these conversations occurred at the galaxy's Opera House during a performance of Squid Lake. From the privacy of the Chancellor's box, he explained that Darth Plagueis the Wise had been a Dark Lord of the Sith so powerful that he could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life itself. Every part of Sidious's story was crafted to target Anakin's deepest fears. His prophetic dreams of Padme dying in childbirth made the promise of power over death impossible to ignore. His frustration with Jedi rules against attachment made him more open to other philosophies. His trust in Padme's concern made this forbidden knowledge seem like guidance rather than a threat. The tale also worked as a test of Anakin's openness to Sith ideas. Later, in the quiet of his office, Sidious revealed his true identity as Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith. Anakin's fear about his dreams had reached a crisis point, leaving him desperate for answers. Rather than letting the truth seem like a betrayal, Sidious framed his dual identity as proof that he alone had the knowledge to help Anakin save Padme through means the Jedi could never offer. The revelation highlighted Sidious's mastery of crisis psychology. He gave Anakin no chance to dwell on the shocking truth. Instead, he turned it immediately into an opportunity. Sith knowledge was not presented as evil, but as the key to preventing the tragedy that haunted Anakin's nights. The Legends novel Revenge of the Sith shows that Anakin's first reaction was to ignite his lightsaber and threaten Palpatine, but then he decided to expose the deception to the Jedi Council. He was still concerned with saving his wife, and believed only Palpatine's knowledge would ensure this. The novel reveals that Sidious had fully anticipated this response. He knew that Jedi training would momentarily outweigh desperation. That expected reaction was not a setback, but part of the plan, creating the inner conflict needed to break Anakin completely. The trap was simple, but devastating. Anakin's moral training demanded that he strike down the Sith, yet his attachment to Padme and his terror of losing her demanded another choice. Doing the right thing meant accepting her death. Saving her meant embracing everything he had been taught to reject. The Legends account of Anakin's inner conflict matches what happens in the Canon movie. Anakin's decision to inform Mace Windu followed exactly what Sidious had expected. He understood that Anakin's initial loyalty to the Jedi would drive him to report the revelation, but he also knew that the subsequent confrontation would create perfect conditions to complete Anakin's corruption. In the movie Revenge of the Sith, the lightsaber duel between Sidious and Mace Windu served dual purposes. It was both a genuine fight for survival and a performance intended to manipulate Anakin when he arrived. Windu's exceptional skill in lightsaber combat made him genuinely dangerous to the Sith Lord. When Anakin arrived at the critical moment, Sidious demonstrated that psychological mastery could be more effective than fighting skill. As he shifted personas, Sidious claimed that the Jedi were taking over. This accusation played on Anakin's growing suspicions about Jedi motives while positioning the Chancellor as the defender of democracy. His desperate pleas for protection exploited Anakin's protective instincts and sense of justice. Anakin struck down Mace Windu's sword hand at the crucial moment. That single action marked the point of no return. In that instant, Anakin crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, choosing personal attachment over moral principle and sealing his transformation. With Windu dead, Sidious faced no more major obstacles, and Anakin's role in the killing meant he could never go back to his old life. The formal ceremony that transformed Anakin into Darth Vader was brief but symbolically complete. By accepting the new identity, he abandoned his former self and embraced a role defined entirely by service to his Sith master. The Sith Lord bestowed upon him the name Darth Vader. The ceremony was short, showing that Anakin's fall was already set. The brevity of the ceremony reflected its inevitability. By this point, Anakin's conversion was psychologically complete, and formal acknowledgement was merely the final step in a process years in the making. Order 66 represented the climax of the most elaborate military conspiracy in galactic history. Transmitted across the galaxy, it instantly transformed loyal clone soldiers into Jedi executioners. The timing was crucial. Scattered across the galaxy on military campaigns, the Jedi were isolated and vulnerable to coordinated attack. The efficiency of the Purge demonstrated the scope of Sidious's long-term planning. The psychological impact on survivors was often as devastating as the physical casualties. Clones, who had fought beside Jedi for 3 years, sharing danger and victory, revealed themselves as programmed killers. This betrayal shattered survivors' faith and loyalty, friendship, and the possibility of trust, creating the foundation for Imperial rule through fear rather than cooperation. Simultaneously, Sidious dispatched Vader to assault the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. This mission served multiple purposes, eliminating potential future threats, completing Vader's psychological transformation through acts that made redemption impossible, and demonstrating to the galaxy that no sanctuary remained inviolate under the New Order. The Temple assault was particularly symbolic. The destruction of the Jedi's most sacred location, combined with the murder of younglings, represented the complete inversion of everything the Order had stood for. Vader's willing participation in these acts severed his last connections to his former identity as a protector of the innocent. As chronicled in the movie Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine then delivered his historic speech to a joint session of the Galactic Senate, announcing the transformation of the Republic into the First Galactic Empire. The speech was a clever piece of politics, making big changes to the government seem like the only way to protect democracy and keep the galaxy safe. The thunderous applause that greeted this announcement represented the tragic culmination of years of careful manipulation. Senators, who had been elected to preserve democratic institutions, cheered their destruction, genuinely believing that only strong executive leadership could preserve order and security against the threats they faced. The Senate's enthusiastic response demonstrated how emergency measures had become normalized. Years of staged crises had trained senators to see extraordinary powers as necessary. By the time Palpatine declared the Empire, most believed that regular democracy could not handle the galaxy's problems. He had carefully built a legal path for this change through emergency laws passed during the Clone Wars, each new power built on the last, making the shift seem lawful rather than a coup. This made resistance harder and gave the Empire a sense of legitimacy. The outcome was Sidious's total victory. Politically, he had turned a democracy into an authoritarian empire while keeping it looking legal. Militarily, he controlled the galaxy's strongest forces, from the clone army to the Imperial Navy. Personally, he had destroyed the Jedi Order and turned the Chosen One into his enforcer. Palpatine's power grew in carefully measured steps. After Dooku's death, no rival remained who could claim leadership of the Sith or expose their conspiracy. Once Anakin was remade as Darth Vader, Sidious gained a powerful apprentice whose loyalty was secured through guilt and the severed ties of his old life. Following the destruction of the Jedi, no organized resistance was left to challenge Imperial rule. Through the legal foundation of the Empire, resistance appeared as treason rather than patriotism. Each stage had been planned with precision. Dooku's death silenced a witness to the Clone Wars' deception. Anakin's fall gave Sidious a powerful apprentice whose loyalty was secured through guilt and the severed ties of his old life. The Purge of the Jedi eliminated the greatest obstacle to Sith dominance. The Empire's laws created a government that appeared legitimate while granting Sidious unchecked control. The transformation was complete. After 1,000 years of preparation, the Sith had achieved their ultimate goal: absolute power over the galaxy and all who lived within it. Though Sidious had mastered the galaxy, a hidden flaw threatened to undo everything he had built. The Reign of Terror. The rise of the Galactic Empire marked the start of Palpatine's 23-year reign, a reign built not on law or justice, but on fear. No longer a hidden manipulator, he now held open and unquestioned authority over the galaxy. His rule was ruthless and far-reaching. The foundations of government were torn apart and rebuilt, and the relationship between rulers and the ruled was permanently transformed across billions of worlds. Fear became his ultimate weapon. In the early years of Imperial rule, Palpatine focused on tightening his grip on power. Potential threats were removed, and government structures were rebuilt to serve his authority. At first, the Imperial Senate remained as a ceremonial body, but real control shifted to regional governors chosen by the Emperor himself. Even with political power secured, one threat remained that could not be controlled by governors or fear alone: the surviving Jedi. One of the Empire's top priorities was eliminating them. Intelligence agencies worked alongside specialized military units trained to hunt Force users. The Inquisitorius program had been planned prior to the fall of the Republic, with Darth Sidious correctly determining that following Order 66, he would need powerful hunters to cull Jedi survivors. After the Empire's formation, Palpatine gave control of the Inquisitors to Darth Vader, who led them in hunting down remaining Jedi. In a twist of fate, many of these Inquisitors were former Jedi themselves. Palpatine had kept watch over vulnerable Jedi during the Clone Wars, ensuring they were spared from Order 66. Prospective Inquisitors were broken down until they capitulated to the dark side, then given a number and set loose on the galaxy. Each hunt removed a potential threat, while sending a chilling message that even Jedi could be broken and turned against their own order. Beyond physical elimination, the Empire waged war against the Jedi through propaganda. Imperial media branded them as dangerous fanatics who had tried to overthrow the government, with the Force dismissed as an ancient religion and the Jedi declared extinct. Across the galaxy, collective memory was reshaped to justify their destruction. While the Empire hunted Jedi and rewrote history, an even more ambitious project was taking shape, one that would become the ultimate symbol of Imperial terror. At the same time, work began on the Empire's ultimate symbol of control, a battle station capable of destroying entire planets. The Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, revealed that the Death Star project began during the Clone Wars under Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. The earliest construction phases took place over Geonosis, where automated factories and Geonosian drones labored to build the skeletal framework for the colossal craft. The project required construction at sites spread across the galaxy, with components joined together at the final assembly site in orbit over Scarif. The Death Star was more than just a military weapon. It was a tool of fear designed to make rebellion unthinkable. Its destructive power showed that any world that resisted could be annihilated, leaving nothing behind. Construction required vast resources. According to Dawn of Rebellion, workforce estimates ranged in the millions. The novel Life Debt explicitly documents that Wookiees were used across the galaxy, shipped away to serve as slave labor in mines and in building structures like the Death Stars. Imperial prisons like Narkina 5 subjected inmates to 7 levels of unrelenting drudgery and grueling quotas, with prisoners forced to assemble Death Star components. This exploitation reinforced Imperial dominance and elevated humans above all other species. Entire worlds were stripped of identity and reduced to resources, while non-human populations were denied unity, representation, and the chance to organize meaningful resistance. To enforce this brutal system, the Emperor needed an enforcer whose very presence would make resistance seem futile. The relationship between Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader was one of master and enforcer. According to the novel Lords of the Sith, their dynamic represented both the rule of two's ultimate perfection and its fatal corruption. Vader became the Empire's primary instrument of terror, carrying out missions too dangerous for conventional forces and spreading fear wherever he appeared. His black cybernetic suit and mechanical breathing made him an unforgettable presence across Imperial space. Few knew his true identity as Anakin Skywalker, and the mystery surrounding him only deepened the fear he inspired. The mission to Ryloth in 14 BBY, as depicted in Lords of the Sith, revealed the toxic reality of their relationship. During their journey, the Emperor questioned Vader about the lessons of the Sith master-apprentice relationship. When pressed, Vader dropped to one knee in submission, a gesture that demonstrated he served not from ambition, but from psychological dependency. Sidious had designed Vader's cybernetic suit to cause constant low-level pain that Vader could channel into dark-side power while creating permanent physical dependency. During the Empire's rise to power, the galaxy bore witness to Sidious's capacity for creating loyal servants and discarded victims in equal measure. While Darth Vader served as the regime's visible enforcer, another figure haunted the shadows, a broken reminder of what happened to those who outlived their usefulness to the Emperor. In the Star Wars Rebels episode Twin Sons, Maul, Sidious's first apprentice, had become a living testament to his former master's cruelty. Consumed by vengeance and stripped of purpose, the Zabrak existed in exile, his obsession with revenge the only constant in a life that had been systematically dismantled. When Obi-Wan Kenobi finally confronted him on Tatooine, he observed what had become of Maul, a rat in the desert. Maul's shattered state revealed the personal cost of serving Sidious's ambitions. The contrast between Vader and Maul showed two sides of the same ruthless strategy. Vader remained valuable as an instrument of Imperial terror, his power channeled into the service of the regime. Maul had been discarded the moment his tactical worth ended, left to survive on hatred alone. The same master had shaped both, but their fates demonstrated that loyalty to Sidious guaranteed nothing beyond temporary utility. This pattern of exploitation extended far beyond individual apprentices. Count Dooku had been manipulated into rebellion and then sacrificed when convenient. Anakin Skywalker had been corrupted through psychological manipulation and bound in service through guilt and dependency. Each case revealed Sidious's fundamental view of beings as expendable resources. Maul's continued existence served as a permanent indictment of this cruelty, a reminder that the Emperor's evil was measured not only in planets destroyed or peoples enslaved, but in the individual souls he had deliberately broken in pursuit of absolute power. Yet for all of the Empire's power and cruelty, resistance began to take root in unexpected places. At first, scattered rebel cells posed little danger. They had limited resources, poor coordination, and little chance of sustaining large campaigns. Over time, however, Imperial policies created the very dissent they sought to destroy. The Gorman Massacre, documented in Andor Season 2, exemplified the regime's ruthlessness. Imperial forces deliberately provoked local resistance to justify resource extraction. When peaceful protesters gathered in Palmo Plaza chanting their defiance, Imperial commanders ordered troops to fire at will, resulting in hundreds of deaths in the plaza and thousands more across the planet. The Empire then spun the massacre as justified response to rebel-backed insurrection. The Empire's greatest tactical miscalculation came when it chose to demonstrate the Death Star's power on a world that could not be more wrong. The destruction of Alderaan marked the Death Star's first use and one of the Empire's greatest mistakes. Intended to terrify would-be rebels, it instead united them in outrage. As shown in A New Hope, Grand Moff Tarkin ordered the destruction despite Princess Leia's cooperation, considering Alderaan a more effective demonstration than the remote Dantooine. Despite Leia's protests that Alderaan was peaceful and had no weapons, Tarkin proceeded with the planet's annihilation. The obliteration of an entire peaceful world proved that no system was safe, no matter its loyalty or importance. The Battle of Yavin was Palpatine's first major defeat, one that announced the arrival of an unexpected new threat. Luke Skywalker's destruction of the Death Star shattered Imperial morale and disrupted strategic planning on several levels. The loss proved that the Empire's ultimate weapon was not invincible. Across the galaxy, resistance movements drew courage from the victory, while Imperial leaders were forced to admit that sheer military strength might not be enough to maintain control forever. The construction of the second Death Star above Endor advanced both objectives. It restored the destructive power lost at Yavin, served as bait to draw the rebel fleet into a decisive confrontation, and created the perfect stage for Palpatine to confront Luke directly. The Emperor's plan was simple. By destroying the rebellion and turning Luke into his apprentice, he would secure his rule for generations to come. At Endor, the trap was sprung. The rebel fleet engaged the Empire's forces, unaware of the station's true capabilities. On board the Death Star, Luke faced the Emperor himself. Palpatine pressed him to embrace his anger and strike in hatred, promising that doing so would grant him the power to save his friends. The moment seemed to offer total victory, the rebellion crushed, and a new Sith apprentice at the Emperor's side. But when the decision came, events turned against him. Instead of standing with his master, Darth Vader chose to save his son. This choice proved fatal to the Emperor's plans. The Emperor's downfall. Palpatine's grip on the galaxy had depended on absolute control. In a single moment of defiance, that foundation crumbled. The Emperor fell into the reactor shaft and died instantly. Vader collapsed, mortally wounded by Palpatine's lightning. In his final moments, he allowed Luke to remove his mask. Father and son saw each other clearly before Vader passed away. The Emperor's death sent shockwaves through the Imperial fleet. Officers who had relied on Palpatine's absolute command now faced an impossible void, and the fleet began to unravel. Some hesitated, while others attempted to continue the fight, but contradictory orders spread confusion throughout the ranks. Capital ships broke formation as commanders struggled to establish control, and in the chaos, several Star Destroyers collided while others simply stopped firing, their crews paralyzed by uncertainty. Then, the second Death Star's reactor detonated in a massive explosion that consumed the incomplete battle station, illuminating the Endor system as debris scattered across space. Meanwhile, the space battle that had seemed hopeless moments before suddenly shifted. Red and Gold squadrons had launched their assault against overwhelming odds. Wedge Antilles led Red Group, while Lando Calrissian commanded Gold Squadron toward the reactor core. Rebel pilots weaved through the blockade, shielding Y-wing bombers as X-wings clashed with TIE fighters in chaotic dogfights. But with the shield generator destroyed and the Imperial fleet disintegrating, the Rebel attack broke through. They reached the reactor core and destroyed the station from within. As depicted in the 1997 special edition of Star Wars Episode VI, Return of the Jedi, celebrations erupted across the galaxy. The Rebel Alliance celebrated in space and on the forest moon below, where Ewoks joined the festivities with drums and bonfires. Rebel pilots embraced aboard their cruisers as news spread through the fleet. The Emperor was dead, the Death Star destroyed. Fireworks lit the skies above Theed on Naboo, and on Tatooine, people assembled in settlements to share the news. Widespread rejoicing marked the end of over 2 decades of tyranny. Luke Skywalker had lost his father, but Vader's final act had ended Palpatine's rule. But Sidious was not the first to reshape the Sith. Centuries earlier, one Dark Lord forged the Rule of Two, the very system that allowed Palpatine's rise. To truly understand how Sidious became possible, you must learn the story of its creator, Darth Bane. Watch his full story next.
At number 2 is the Sith who almost broke the rules the dark side had operated under for thousands of years. Darth Plagueis spent decades on one question: could the Force be used to keep someone alive past the point where the body should have failed? According to the Legends novel by James Luceno, he got close enough that his own apprentice killed him in his sleep to stop the work from being finished. What he was researching, who was watching, and why his death is the reason the Empire ever existed is the story coming up.
On the frozen world of Megiddo, around 120 BBY, a boy named Hego Damask was born, a boy who would one day become Darth Plagueis. The Sith had spent years planning his birth, creating someone who could use the Force like no other. Years before Hego's birth, his father, Kar Damask, met a mysterious starship designer named Rugus Gnome. While the meeting seemed like a chance encounter, Gnome was secretly the Sith Lord Darth Tenebrous. This smart Bith had planned every detail of their meeting as part of a grand plan that would change the galaxy's future. Therefore, he set up a marriage between Kar and a Force-sensitive female Moon who served as his follower. Their goal was simple: to create a child strong in the Force. Although Kar had no idea about the manipulation when he agreed to the arrangement, Hego's mother knowingly played her part, seducing Kar to create a Force-strong heir. Even before he was born, the conspirators had already set their trap in motion. Because official canon only gives glimpses of Plagueis' story, we've drawn from Star Wars legends to present his full life. The Unusual Child. Hego's powers proved more dangerous than anyone had expected, and by age 5, he could already use Force manipulation to control others. In one horrifying incident, he used a mind trick to make another child jump to his death. When his father witnessed this act, he became deeply disturbed by what his son had done. However, his mother understood what this meant completely. From the very beginning, she watched him closely, tracking his development and keeping his abilities hidden from the wider world. She acted as Tenebrous' partner in the plan, warning Hego to hide his powers, while knowing that darker schemes were unfolding, since Hego's potential had caught the attention of darker forces. While Tenebrous had monitored the boy from the start, he was waiting for the force-strong heir his manipulation had produced. When the boy reached the right age, the Sith Lord approached his parents with an offer they couldn't refuse. In exchange for their son, they would receive wealth and advancement beyond their dreams. Therefore, Hego's unsuspecting father handed him over for riches, unaware of Tenebrous' true identity or his wife's role in the plot. Under Tenebrous' teaching, Hego Damask died while Darth Plagueis was born, as the young moon left Megiddo behind forever, taking his Sith name as an apprentice. Still, Tenebrous proved no traditional mentor, since he taught the young apprentice only what served his own twisted ends. He pushed Plagueis to develop the secret art of midichlorian manipulation, while withholding crucial knowledge about the dark side's deeper mysteries. What Plagueis didn't realize was that his master had a dangerous plan. Tenebrous secretly saw the young moon only as a tool for his own eternal life, viewing him not as a successor, but as a way to unlock immortality's secrets. Moreover, unknown to his student, Tenebrous broke the rule of two by secretly training another student, making Darth Venomous his backup plan. Ancient Sith records showed that as the young apprentice became more powerful every year, he began sensing that his master was keeping important secrets from him. Still, he had no idea about the second apprentice, or Tenebrous' ultimate plan to use him as a mere stepping stone. In 67 BBY, everything changed when Plagueis finally seized his chance for freedom deep within the mining cavern of Baldemnik. During what appeared to be a routine surveying mission, Plagueis saw the cavern's ceiling begin to collapse. Therefore, Plagueis used the chaos to his advantage by causing more rocks to fall and crush his master. As Tenebrous lay trapped and dying beneath the rubble, his apprentice personally snapped the Bith's neck with his bare hands. Only after killing Tenebrous did the moon discover the shocking truth about Darth Venomous. This betrayal from beyond the grave filled Plagueis with rage, reinforcing his belief that he could trust no one completely. He then defeated and captured Venomous alive for horrific experiments. The Sith studied the Bith's body through increasingly intensive tests until, around 42 BBY, he began the most terrible phase, repeatedly killing and reviving Venomous to unlock Death's secrets, continuing until the tortured body couldn't take it anymore. Thus, the student had become the master, and now he could pursue the one thing that terrified him most, his own inevitable death. Conquering death itself. With Tenebrous dead, Darth Plagueis emerged from the shadows as the new Dark Lord of the Sith. He then took on the public identity of Hego Damask II, a respected moon businessman and political money man who commanded vast wealth through Damask Holdings. Having inherited his father's financial empire, which gave him ready access to powerful people across the galaxy, he used this position to advance his goals. While posing as this influential banker, Plagueis became a trusted ally to politicians and royalty, all while quietly advancing the Sith grand plan that had been developing for centuries. Through Damask Holdings, he subtly influenced major institutions like the Banking Guild and even the Trade Federation's leadership. By day, he ruled the highest circles of galactic finance as a powerful banking tycoon. By night, he was a Sith Lord, manipulating events to weaken the Republic. Every handshake brought him closer to ultimate power. The Dark Lord made alliances with crime groups like the Hutt Cartel and Black Sun, using their resources to eliminate threats across the galaxy's underworld. Still, more than political power or revenge against the Jedi, Plagueis wanted what had escaped generations before him: living forever. His single fear of losing power drove him to master midichlorian control, learning to create life and to prevent death through methods no other Sith had successfully achieved. Therefore, influencing midichlorians to create life and prevent death became his greatest focus. Plagueis used his cruel experiments with the trapped Darth Venomous to push beyond what the Force normally allowed. He learned to heal deadly wounds and make lifespans longer through his research. He could even bring those who had recently died back to life through careful control of their life force. However, what Plagueis didn't realize was that the Force itself was watching. Eventually, Plagueis came to believe that this Force energy kept a careful balance. His actions might cause an equal and opposite reaction. This theory would prove correct, as the Force was preparing to strike back against his extreme control of life. Old Sith writings show that in 42 BBY, the Dark Lord did a ritual alongside his student. The ritual was so terrible that it seemed to make the Force angry. Working together, Plagueis and his student tried to control the Force energy completely, trying to tip the balance toward darkness forever. The experiment seemed to work at first, giving them an understanding of life unlike anything seen before. Years later, Plagueis' student would recall how he and his master, together, learned the dark side's final secrets. However, the Force's response was fast and final. Plagueis sensed that the Force itself may have struck back. Shortly afterward, a problem appeared in the form of a fatherless boy on a distant desert world. Their actions had caused the Force to create a Jedi's predicted chosen one who would fix things. Years before this terrible ritual, Plagueis had realized he would need a smart and sneaky partner, someone younger and more skilled with politics who could carry out their plans on the galactic stage. So the Dark Lord had begun searching for someone who could handle both politics and the dark side with equal skill. The perfect weapon. Fate delivered exactly what Darth Plagueis had been seeking. On the peaceful world of Naboo in 65 BBY, the Dark Lord was conducting business in the royal court. Posing as the influential banker Hago Damask, he encountered a young nobleman whose potential immediately caught his attention. Palpatine was the heir of House Palpatine, a teenager burning with ambition. Palpatine's natural political instincts and talent for reading people marked him as the ideal candidate for Sith training. Gradually, the Master gained Palpatine's trust. He encouraged the young man's resentments against his controlling father and fed his natural lust for power. The Dark Lord presented himself as a mentor who understood Palpatine's true potential, someone who could guide him to the greatness he deserved. His manipulation was subtle yet devastating, playing on every weakness in the proud youth's character while slowly corrupting his moral foundation. But Plagueis' plan reached far deeper than simple corruption. Years of careful tricks finally reached their breaking point. During a fight with his family, Palpatine's held-back rage suddenly exploded. Guided by his mentor's influence and consumed by years of anger, the young nobleman did the unthinkable. He murdered his father and entire family in a single act of violence that changed galactic history forever. The Sith Lord ensured the crime remained hidden, making the family's disappearance look like a tragic accident that would never implicate his new apprentice. That horrific moment severed Palpatine's last ties to his former life. The Master gave him a new identity and purpose. Therefore, Palpatine fully embraced Plagueis as his master and took on the Sith mantle of Darth Sidious. Yet he would continue using his family name publicly as part of their long-term deception. Under Plagueis' teaching, Sidious proved to be everything his master had hoped for and more. He learned not only the techniques of the dark side, but also the art of presenting different faces to various audiences. Sidious could act as a friendly senator to his colleagues, a caring mentor to allies, and a ruthless master to his followers. Each persona was perfectly crafted to achieve his goals while keeping his true nature completely hidden. However, their partnership carried the seeds of its own destruction. The relationship between master and apprentice was built on the Sith rule of two. They worked together toward common goals while both understanding that eventually, Sidious would have to surpass and destroy his master. This tension forced them to continuously adapt and grow stronger. They knew each could be a threat, but they still relied on each other to reach their goals. But neither master nor apprentice could foresee the betrayal that would reshape the galaxy. The Dark Lord recognized that Sidious's greatest strength lay in politics rather than pure force power. With his master's behind-the-scenes support, Sidious began building friendships with key figures across the galaxy. He befriended senators, corporate leaders, and influential nobles, all while keeping his true nature perfectly hidden from even the most perceptive politicians. Their partnership achieved its first major victory in 52 BBY, when Palpatine was elected as Naboo's representative in the Galactic Senate. This achievement required eliminating Naboo's senator, Vidar Kim, through a staged accident to open the seat, a death the Master arranged while Sidious maintained believable innocence. The Legends novel Darth Plagueis confirms that Palpatine was still apprenticed to Plagueis upon entering the Senate, showing their collaboration during these early political years. For the first time in a millennium, a Sith Lord sat within the Republic's government, guided from the shadows by his master. As Sidious's influence grew, so did his independence from his master's direct guidance. He began undertaking missions of his own, some with the moon's blessing and others in secret. Sidious took particular interest in the galaxy's criminal underworld and the forgotten systems that felt abandoned by the Republic's corruption. During this period, Sidious also acquired his own secret apprentice, named Darth Maul, a young Zabrak trained from childhood as a deadly enforcer, though Sidious viewed him as merely a tool rather than a true Sith heir. Maul's existence represented Sidious's growing confidence, his willingness to prepare for the day when he would have to stand alone against his master. The two Sith Lords started taking bolder steps in their plan. Ancient records tell of secret meetings in which Plagueis, acting as Hugo Damask, and Sidious planted seeds of doubt in Jedi Master Dooku. At the same time, they also pushed his friend Sifo Dyas to act on his visions of war. They were systematically corrupting and manipulating Force users who could serve their purposes when the time came. Yet beneath the surface cooperation, tensions were building. Sidious had learned everything his master could teach him and was beginning to view the cautious approach as a limitation rather than wisdom. His ambitions were growing beyond what even Plagueis had expected. Death of the Deathless. By 32 BBY, chaos threatened to consume the galaxy. Most major problems had been caused by the two Sith Lords working together. Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious spent decades corrupting the Republic, and their hard work was finally paying off. In the Senate, endless debates dragged on. Powerful corporations ignored the central authorities, and the Jedi did not notice the growing darkness. Therefore, for the last step of the grand plan, a galactic war was needed, one that would give the Republic a reason to become more controlling. To make this happen, the Sith Lords built a network of pawns all over the galaxy. All of them were unaware that their actions were serving the Sith's true goal. But everything changed when powerful enemies struck back at them. As the Master's public influence grew through Damask Holdings, so did the number of those who saw him as a threat. By the early 30s BBY, this danger materialized into coordinated assassination attempts. Ex-King Ars Varuna of Naboo was the most dangerous because he understood how completely the ancient moon had deceived and destroyed him. Working with allies, including Senator Pack's team, Varuna hired Maladian assassins to kill the banker who ruined his rule. The attack nearly succeeded, cutting Plagueis' throat and forcing him to rely on a breathing apparatus. Sidious arrived in time to fend off the assassins, secretly saving his master's life while maintaining his facade of loyalty. However, this injury would make the Dark Lord vulnerable in ways he never imagined. He wore a respirator after that. The ancient moon believed constant vigilance was key to cheating death, not knowing this technology would later help cause his downfall. After the attack, the Master became terrified of dying and hardly slept. He used the dark side to keep himself alive for years. The ancient moon now relied on technology to breathe, and this technological dependence would prove crucial in the years to come. What Plagueis didn't realize was that the galaxy itself was about to test their plans. Sidious was executing increasingly bold operations under his master's guidance. He strengthened ties with systems that felt abandoned by the stagnant Republic, encouraging them to consider more drastic action. The Neimoidians of the Trade Federation proved especially easy to manipulate. They held grudges over taxes and trade rules that Sidious carefully worsened. A long campaign of corruption led to the scheme to blockade Naboo. The Trade Federation claimed they were protesting trade taxes, but the real goal was to create a crisis that would make Palpatine Supreme Chancellor. From the Federation's motives to the Senate's predictable reactions, every part had been planned years in advance. But there was another crucial element the Sith had prepared: Making sure the Republic would have an army when the war finally came required careful planning. The Dark Lord used layers of helpers and his banking guild connections to arrange the funding. He secretly built a clone army for the Republic. Plagueis carefully tricked Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas and played on his real fears about galactic security. This way, Plagueis ensured this massive military force would be built. Consequently, when the time came, the Republic would have soldiers ready. Yet those same soldiers would eventually answer to the Sith when the proper moment arrived. But during the unfolding Naboo crisis, something unprecedented occurred. Reports of a problem reached Plagueis in the Force. A boy named Anakin Skywalker, born without a father on the remote desert world of Tatooine. The Dark Lord immediately recognized the terrible twist. The Force had created a Chosen One in response to their actions from years before. A Jedi prophecy had predicted one who would bring balance by destroying the Sith. Therefore, that very weapon of their destruction had arrived. Deeply unnerved by this threat, Plagueis urgently pressed Sidious to ensure the boy would never become a Jedi. Darth Maul's mission on Naboo was specifically designed to eliminate Qui-Gon Jinn, the Jedi who discovered Anakin. By removing the one Jedi most likely to train the boy, the Sith hoped to prevent their own destruction. The Dark Lord, still recovering from serious injuries and relying on his breathing device, turned his focus more toward his research about living forever. He felt confident enough to imagine stepping into the public eye, perhaps as co-ruler alongside his student in the new era. While Plagueis trusted Sidious to handle their political schemes, he focused on the final goal, never dying through midichlorian control. Yet Sidious was growing impatient with his master's vision. He had learned everything the older Sith could teach him about politics and manipulation. Where the master preferred to act from the shadows, Sidious was ready to seize power openly, ruling through strength rather than secrecy. He now saw the ancient moon more as an obstacle than an ally. But Sidious had no intention of sharing power with anyone. He wanted the throne entirely for himself. Imagining his master stepping into the light as co-ruler filled him with disgust. It strengthened his resolve to eliminate the Dark Lord before those plans could take shape. Both Sith Lords understood that their greatest triumph was close. The invasion of Naboo would set in motion events leading to Palpatine's election as Supreme Chancellor. This would complete a goal the Sith had plotted for a millennium. For the first time since their defeat at Ruusan, a Dark Lord of the Sith would openly hold the reins of galactic power, even if hidden behind a false identity. Therefore, Plagueis quietly oversaw these events as the final test of his grand plan. Everything he had worked toward for decades was finally coming to fruition. As Palpatine's election drew near, Plagueis planned their victory celebration with wine and grand speeches about the future. The Naboo crisis had succeeded perfectly. Chancellor Valorum fell, and the Senate now supported Senator Palpatine. After decades of careful manipulation, the Master's ultimate goal was finally in reach. In an expensive penthouse high above Coruscant, Master and apprentice gathered to celebrate. Plagueis spoke eagerly of their future plans, envisioning a galaxy reshaped by Sith ideals. With unlimited resources now at their disposal, even the final secrets of immortality seemed within reach. Since the attack on his life, Plagueis had never allowed himself to sleep or let his guard down. But as victory finally arrived, the moon began to celebrate with rare wine, savoring their triumph. This moment of vulnerability would prove more dangerous than Plagueis could imagine. The apprentice had decided long before that night that his master must die. He had learned everything the ancient moon could teach him and had grown beyond his plans for the future. The Dark Lord sensed nothing amiss as death approached. In the dark chamber, with Coruscant's lights shining below, Sidious struck without warning. Force lightning erupted from his fingertips, overwhelming the unsuspecting moon. The electrical assault shattered Plagueis' breathing apparatus, leaving him gasping for air. The future Emperor laughed at his dying master with cold satisfaction. All the legendary wisdom had failed to see this betrayal coming. Here was the Sith Lord who had learned to save others from death, yet he could not save himself. All this knowledge of the Force and secrets of life crumbled to nothing when his own apprentice betrayed him. The Dark Lord was struck down by his apprentice's hand, just as he had once destroyed Darth Tenebrous before him. Hence, the cycle of Sith treachery continued. as it always had throughout their dark history.
And at number 1 is the Sith every other name on this list ever served, opposed, or stood in the shadow of. He was born a farmer's son named Tenebrae on a backwater world called Medrias. By the time he died 1500 years later, he had been called Vitiate, then Sith Emperor, then Valkorion, and the bodies he had worn over those centuries numbered in the dozens. The first one he wore out was earned by draining every living thing on the Sith home world of Nathema in a single ritual. Nothing the galaxy ever produced reached the level he reached.
Child of Shadows, a legend story. Our story begins in 5113 BBY on a farming world called Medrias, where a child named Tenebrae was born. From the moment he drew his first breath, everyone around him knew that something was wrong with this infant, who never cried like normal babies and showed no emotion at all. There was a reason for his darkness that would soon become clear, because Tenebrae's mother had kept a terrible secret that would shape the galaxy's future. She had had an affair with Sith Lord Drameth, which meant that Tenebrae carried pure Sith blood in his veins. For 6 years, this deadly secret stayed hidden from the man who raised him. But when his stepfather finally discovered the truth, he attacked Tenebrae's mother in a rage that would change everything. Because when Tenebrae felt his stepfather's raw anger flooding through the Force like hot metal, he realized he could feed on it hungrily. With this dark craving driving him, he snapped the man's neck with the Force. Instead of being scared by what he had done, Tenebrae smiled with real pleasure. He had just discovered that pain and fear made him stronger than anything else in the world. Once he understood this terrible truth, he immediately decided to get much more of both by hurting the people around him. For months afterward, Tenebrae tortured his own mother. This wasn't random cruelty, but careful testing, as he fed on her terror like a hungry animal while studying exactly how different types of suffering could make his power in the Force grow stronger. When he finally killed her, it was with cold planning. Still, only 6, he had already become a monster. With his powers growing stronger through each act of cruelty, by age 10, he had taken over large parts of Medrias through fear and murder. But his greatest test was still ahead, confronting the very Sith Lord whose blood ran through his veins. The Father's Legacy. When Tenebrae was 10 years old, his true father came looking for him. Sith Lord Drameth had heard strange stories about a powerful child on Medrias who claimed to be his son. Curious about these disturbing reports, he wanted to see the boy for himself. The meeting was short and deadly. When Drameth tried to control his son's mind like any other Sith would, Tenebrae did something that should have been impossible. He turned the attack back on his father, stealing away all of Drameth's Force power and driving the ancient Sith Lord completely insane before killing him. Not satisfied with just murder, Tenebrae tapped his father's spirit like a prisoner, keeping Drameth's soul as a weapon he planned to use against his enemies in the future. Now with his father dead, Tenebrae spent the following 3 years taking over the rest of Medrias. By age 13, he controlled the entire world and was ready for the next step in his rise to power. He went to meet Dark Lord Marka Ragnos, who ruled the Sith Empire at the time. Ragnos was so impressed by what the boy had done that he made Tenebrae an official Sith Lord, giving him the new name Lord Vitiate and letting him rule his world, which Vitiate immediately named Nathema. But even with official recognition and his own world to command, his darkest act was still to come. The Consuming Darkness. Lord Vitiate ruled Nathema with iron control for over a century, but then disaster struck. In 5000 BBY, the Sith Empire suffered its greatest defeat in the Great Hyperspace War, as their assault on the Galactic Republic failed miserably, forcing the surviving Sith Lords to flee back to their territories in disgrace. While others saw only failure, Vitiate's smart mind saw a great opportunity hidden within this crushing defeat. He sent a message across the broken Sith Empire. The message promised a special ritual that would give them ultimate power to destroy the Jedi forever. But the thousands of Sith Lords who answered his call had no idea they were walking into a trap. When they arrived on Nathema expecting salvation and ultimate power, Vitiate revealed his true plan. By then, it was far too late to escape. He seized control of all their minds at once in a display of power that should have been impossible. But his hunger went far beyond the assembled Force users. He consumed every living thing on the entire planet. Every death fed more dark side energy into his being while stripping the Force itself from the world. When the ritual ended, Nathema was completely dead. In exchange for this mass murder, Vitiate achieved something no Force user had ever done before: true immortality. But his hunger was not stilled yet, as he would spend the next 1,000 years building an empire that could finally give him the power he craved. Empire of Shadows. With Nathema dead and his immortality secured, the now Emperor of the Sith began his next phase of conquest. For 2 decades, he hid in the unknown regions, gathering the surviving Sith who had escaped the Republic's purge. The Emperor led these survivors on a 20-year journey through unknown regions until, in 4980 BBY, they discovered Dromund Kaas, a world perfect for rebuilding the Sith Empire from its ashes. Learning from the past, the Emperor carefully studied the old Empire's greatest failures. He created a totally new system of government where the Dark Council would handle day-to-day operations while he retreated into the shadows to become the secret ruler. His greatest trick was starting the devastating Mandalorian Wars that would reshape galactic politics for generations. Few understood the true puppet master behind the conflict that claimed millions of lives. To begin this carefully planned war, he secretly convinced the Mandalorians to attack the Republic. First, he sent a Sith messenger who planted visions of great conquest in Mandalore the Ultimate's mind, pushing the warrior clans into open war against the Republic. His real purpose was testing the Republic's military strength and political resolve under extreme pressure. Young Jedi Knights named Revan and Malak began investigating the war's mysterious true cause and eventually tracked him to Dromund Kaas. The Emperor had been expecting their arrival for years and took control of their minds completely, using techniques perfected on 8,000 Sith Lords. He changed the idealistic Jedi into Darth Revan and Darth Malak before sending them back to Republic space with orders to weaken the Republic for his invasion. But the Emperor made a crucial mistake that would haunt him for centuries. Revan and Malak had stronger wills than he expected and broke free from his mental control to find the ancient Starforge by themselves. They used the Starforge to build their own Sith Empire, and the resulting Jedi Civil War nearly destroyed the entire Jedi Order while serving his purposes, even if it didn't happen according to plan. When Revan was eventually captured, the Emperor kept him in stasis for over 300 years, but Revan's constant resistance slowed the Emperor's plans and weakened his connection to the dark side. Despite these unexpected setbacks, the Emperor remained patient because he had unlimited time to achieve his goals, while mortal beings could only oppose him for a few decades at most. But his true final goal was far more terrible than conquering the Republic or destroying the Jedi Order. Every war and every death was merely fuel for his final plan, where, when the last living thing in the universe finally died, he would enjoy perfect peace and wait for the cycle to begin again. The Emperor didn't want to rule the galaxy. He wanted to consume it completely. So for the next 1,000 years, he played puppet master from the shadows, always testing, always planning, until in 3681 BBY, his Sith Empire finally came out of hiding and started the Great Galactic War against the Republic. For 30 years, the galaxy burned as his armies took over world after world, even attacking Coruscant itself. Only when he got distracted by other plans did he agree to the Treaty of Coruscant in 3650Y BBY, leaving both sides stuck in an uneasy peace. While this devastating war raged openly across the galaxy, the Emperor was secretly building something much more dangerous in the unknown regions. Because even as he plotted to destroy the Republic, he was already building something that would surpass his wildest dreams of power. But the perfect world he created was about to be destroyed by the one thing it couldn't survive: his own family. The Broken Crown. After the Great Galactic War, both empires were still recovering when the Emperor vanished into the unknown regions. While exploring these uncharted worlds, he discovered something incredible: Zakuul and its legendary Eternal Fleet. Thousands of AI-controlled battlecruisers floated in deep space, This technology was far beyond anything in known space, but claiming this power required a completely new approach. Taking the name Valkorion, he began a new life while keeping his original body hidden on Dromund Kaas. As Valkorion, he created the Eternal Empire, a seeming utopia where citizens lived comfortably under their immortal emperor's guidance. This perfect act hid the same monster that had consumed Nathema, though the emperor played his role flawlessly. To complete his vision, Valkorion decided he needed a family. Senya Tyrell had served as a brave knight of Zakul, someone who dared to speak her mind even to the Emperor himself. He married her, and together they had 3 children, twin sons Arcan and Thexan, and a daughter named Vaylin. Senya had led missions across the galaxy with unmatched skill and honor, earning her place as the finest knight of Zakul. When she first met Valkorion in the throne room, she was struck by moments of unexpected kindness. She fell in love with those fleeting moments, never realizing they were just another lie. Only years later, watching him send their daughter to be tortured, did she finally see the monster she had married. Their sons, Arcan and Thexan, shared everything. Training sessions where they pushed each other to excel, quiet conversations about their father's impossible expectations, and dreams of earning his respect that burned in their hearts every day. For years, the deception worked perfectly, but the Emperor's true nature couldn't remain hidden forever, and cracks began to show in his perfect family when Valkorion showed complete lack of interest toward his sons, despite their desperate attempts to earn approval. However, his treatment of his own daughter Vaylin revealed the monster beneath the mask. Vaylin's powers showed up when she was very young, and she could move objects with just her mind. However, these abilities were so powerful that they terrified everyone who saw them, which made even her own father afraid of what she might become. These abilities were so immense they actually scared the immortal emperor. But instead of helping her grow and flourish, Valkorion saw his daughter as nothing more than a threat to his power. He sent her to a facility on Nathema. There, she endured brutal mental conditioning designed to suppress her powers, torture that would twist her into something far worse than he feared, while breaking Senya's heart when she discovered what was happening to their daughter. When Senya tried to rescue Vaylin, Valkorion stopped her efforts with cold calculation. When later she tried to flee with all 3 children, they rejected their mother and called her weak for opposing their father, breaking the perfect family that Valkorion had created through his complete inability to understand love or real connection. His children grew up damaged by his emotional coldness and cruel treatment, carrying deep anger that would eventually lead to the downfall of their immortal father. Blood and betrayal. Stories of mysterious attacks on border worlds made Darth Mar decide to hunt down the legendary Sith Emperor. He assembled a team of Republic operatives and launched an expedition into the unknown regions, searching for the source of these brutal raids on both Republic and Imperial territories. But the end of Valkorion's perfect empire began much closer to home. Arcan and Thexan returned from military campaigns with terrible scars from their battles against both Republic and Imperial worlds. Arcan had lost an arm in the fighting, while both brothers carried the weight of countless victories that meant nothing to their father. Despite recognition after years of being ignored, the twin brothers presented trophies from their conquest to Valkorion, hoping that finally, after all their achievements, he would show them the approval they craved more than anything else in the galaxy. But Valkorion's response was the same crushing indifference he had always shown. He treated their achievements as meaningless distractions while showing no emotion whatsoever. After a lifetime of being ignored by the one person whose approval they wanted most, something snapped in Arcan. He attacked his father with his lightsaber in pure rage. When Thexan tried to stop the violence, Arcan accidentally struck down his beloved twin brother instead. The accidental killing of his closest companion completely broke something essential in Arcan's spirit. Yet even witnessing his son's death, Valkorion showed no emotion. Arcan's grief transformed into rage beyond anything he had ever experienced. But outside events were about to give him the perfect chance for revenge. Darth Mar and his team had entered unknown regions, hunting for the source of attacks on both their territories and searching for the legendary Sith Emperor. Arcan's armies caught them completely by surprise, dragging Mar and the expedition's other leader, the Outlander, to Zakuul in chains like common prisoners. Darth Mar and the Outlander were dragged to the throne room where the Emperor waited. As soon as they entered, they could feel his dark presence crushing down on them like a weight. Yet they still called him out because they knew Zakuul was his second empire. Furthermore, they knew he destroyed Ziost, and they also knew he started decades of war between the Republic and Empire. The Emperor stood up and unchained Darth Mar with the Force. Then he demanded that Mar kneel before him, but Mar wasn't about to bow to anyone, so instead he killed 3 Zakuul guards in seconds. However, Valkorion responded with force lightning that tore through Mar's body, which killed him instantly. After that, he captured the Outlander, but then made a final mistake that would cost him everything, because in that throne room, he revealed his true identity as the immortal Sith Emperor. As a result, he gave Arcan exactly what he needed for revenge. Valkorion commanded Arcan to kill the Outlander, so Arcan drew his lightsaber. But instead of following orders, he made a choice that shocked his father. First, he cut the Outlander free, and then told him that this was their only chance to take down the Emperor. After that, Arcan charged his father with his lightsaber, which kept him occupied. While Arcan lay on the floor, the Outlander drove his lightsaber through Valkorion's chest. He thought he'd finally killed the immortal Sith Emperor who had caused so much suffering across the galaxy. But this was exactly what the ancient Emperor had been planning all along. The moment his body died, Valkorion's spirit jumped into the Outlander's mind using methods he'd spent centuries perfecting. But this host was different than anyone he'd controlled before. His body was dead, yet Valkorion lived on inside the Outlander's head. For 5 years, the Outlander stayed frozen in carbonite while Valkorion whispered in their dreams, trying to twist their thoughts. But the Outlander's will was stronger than he expected, fighting back against every attempt at control. When the Outlander finally escaped, Valkorion played the helpful mentor. He offered his power when they needed it most, pretending to guide them toward victory, all while hiding his true goal, complete possession of their body. The irony was bitter. He'd once enslaved 8,000 Sith Lords without breaking a sweat, yet this single person kept slipping through his grasp. This was his final gamble. Either he would claim ultimate victory, or everything would crumble around him. The Last Deception. Valkorion played advisor while the Outlander fought Arcan's tyranny across the galaxy. The Outlander gathered allies from every corner of the known worlds, built a resistance movement that grew stronger with each victory, and eventually redeemed Arcan through his mother Senya's love. In a desperate fight aboard the gravestone, Senya begged her son to stop his anger. Her words reached him, turning him from a cruel ruler into someone who felt sorry for what he had done. Arcan went into hiding, finally free of the rage that had consumed him. But when Valen broke free from her mental conditioning, she became far more dangerous than Arcan had ever been. Years of torture had twisted her abilities into pure rage that threatened to tear apart everything in the galaxy. She had to be stopped before her unstable power destroyed entire worlds. The final confrontation on Odessen ended when the Outlander and his allies defeated her in combat, her uncontrolled power ultimately contributing to her downfall. With Thexan and Valen dead and Arcan vanished into hiding, the Outlander claimed the Eternal Throne. This was exactly what Valkorion had been planning throughout their entire relationship, every battle and every victory leading to this moment. He revealed his true intentions with cold satisfaction, telling the Outlander they had been nothing more than a carefully shaped weapon designed to serve his ultimate purpose. Now, he would take their body and rule once more as the immortal Emperor. Valkorion continued his pitch, his voice echoing in the Outlander's mind. He told them to look around at the endless war between Republic and Empire. He offered peace through strength, where the strong would survive. The weak would be protected, but the Outlander had been preparing for this inevitable betrayal. The ultimate battle took place within the Outlander's mind rather than the physical world. They pulled out the holocron of Lord Dramath, Valkorion's tortured father, and discovered the Emperor's greatest weakness. The Outlander spoke of the same conditioning phrase Valkorion had used to control Valen, and it became his weakness when turned against him. Supported by the spirits of those he had wronged, Senya, Arkan, Valen, and countless others, the Outlander turned all of Valkorion's weapons against him with deadly results. In his final moments, Valkorion raged against the fate claiming him. The son of a farmer who had become a god through mass murder finally died as he had lived. Completely alone, consumed by the same darkness he had used for so long. But even this clear victory contained one final hidden danger, yet death would not be the end for the immortal Emperor. Death of a god. When Lord Scourge and Jedi Kira Carson destroyed Tenebray's original preserved body on Dromund Kaas, something terrible was released, a plague of darkness. This was Tenebray's last chance to stay alive after death. The supernatural plague targeted Jedi like Satele Shan, turning her and her followers into mindless servants as it searched for a powerful Force user to possess completely. Satele Shan became the plague's primary target, but the Outlander and their allies recognized the signs of his influence. In the climactic battle known as Echoes of Oblivion, all three aspects of the Emperor's identity appeared at the same time to fight for continued existence. Tenebrae, the cruel child, Vitiate, the immortal Sith Lord, and Valkorion, the false Emperor. Heroes from across galactic history united against them. Revan, Mitra Surik, Darth Mar, and countless others who had suffered under his rule joined forces. Their combined will proved stronger than his accumulated power, as love and sacrifice beat hatred and selfishness in the final confrontation. Finally, the galaxy was free from the son of a farmer who had tried to consume everything that lived.
5 Sith, rank from the survivor of a dead world to the Emperor who outlived his own death by a millennium and a half. But the Order itself, the species and bloodlines that built the Sith into what it became, runs back 100,000 years. Watch the entire history of the Sith species next.